The wind stirred through the tall grass, carrying a restless energy that unsettled me. Normally, this sound soothed me, like a quiet lullaby from the land itself. But today, it felt different, like something was coming. I pulled my worn shawl tighter around my shoulders, though the thin wool did little against the morning chill. Strands of my dark brown hair had slipped from the neat braid I'd tied earlier, whipping around my face like restless fingers. I pushed them back, scanning the familiar dirt path that led to our small cottage. "Matilda, stay away from the edge," I called, my voice firm but warm. My little sister stood balanced on a rock overlooking the creek, blonde pigtails bouncing as she giggled. At 8 years old, she was all soft cheeks and bright eyes, the light in our home that none of us could do without. She looked up at me, beaming.
Clem, can I braid your hair today?
She asked, already reaching for the loose strands. I knelt beside her with a smirk. "Only if you do it properly this time. Last time, I nearly walked into town looking like a bird had built a nest on my head." Matilda giggled, rubbing her tiny hands over her stomach.
But first we need breakfast.
She chirped. Before I could respond, a voice called from behind me.
"Clem, wait up."
I turned to see Jack, my younger brother, jogging toward us. His wild curls bounced with each step, his tunic half-buttoned, and his boots covered in mud. At 15, he was growing taller by the day, lean and strong like our father, with the same serious eyes. I adjusted the basket in my hands, filled with bread I had prepared before sunrise. "Come on," I said, stepping toward our home. Our father, Henry, was an Omega. Respected, yes, but respect didn't fill empty bellies. The Iron Claw pack wasn't wealthy, and he worked himself to the bone to provide for us, never complaining, never asking for more. I had taken on that same burden without question. We all worked hard just to keep our heads above water. That was the way of things. Inside the small cottage, I stood at the wooden table, kneading dough. The table wobbled slightly with each press of my hands, its rough surface worn from years of use. Jack smirked from his seat.
"You're kneading that dough like you're mad at it."
Before I could respond, a deep chuckle filled the room. Dad stood in the doorway, arms crossed, a knowing look in his eyes.
"Clem,
He said, stepping inside.
we've got a visitor coming today."
I straightened. "A visitor?" He nodded, settling into his usual chair by the fire.
"Simon."
Jack frowned.
"Who's Simon?"
Dad's gaze grew distant, nostalgic.
"An old friend. We grew up together here in Ironclaw. We were inseparable once."
I tilted my head. "And now?" Dad exhaled slowly.
Now he's the alpha of the Blood Moon Pack.
Silence filled the room. The Blood Moon Pack. Their warriors were the fiercest, their lands the richest, and their alpha? Untouchable. I folded my hands, absorbing the weight of that statement. So why is he coming here? Dad's lips curved into a small smile.
Because despite everything, he's still Simon. And old friends don't forget where they came from.
Jack muttered.
Bet he doesn't live in a pack house anymore.
I nudged him with my foot. Show some respect. Dad chuckled.
He'll be here in a few hours. We should make the place presentable.
That was all Matilda needed to hear. She jumped up, clapping her hands.
We have to clean. We need flowers.
I grabbed her before she could run outside barefoot. Slow down. We'll make it nice, but we're not turning it into a festival. Jack groaned.
"Do I have to help?"
Dad raised a brow.
Unless you want to be on firewood duty all winter.
Jack sighed dramatically but got up.
"Fine."
We worked quickly. The house was small. Stone walls, wooden beams, a fireplace that crackled on cold nights. It wasn't much, but it was home. I dusted shelves, straightened the few books we owned, and wiped down the table until it gleamed. Jack carried in fresh logs for the fire, grumbling but doing his part. Matilda gathered wildflowers, arranging them in a clay jar at the center of the table. By the time we finished, the place looked welcoming. I turned to Dad. Do you think he'll even recognize it? A quiet smile played on his lips.
He will.
The sun was beginning to dip when a group of riders appeared in the distance. My heart pounded as I stood outside with Jack and Matilda. Simon, Alpha of the Blood Moon Pack. And then I saw him. He rode at the front, his presence commanding. Broad-shouldered, tall, with dark hair neatly tied back, though a few strands had slipped free, framing sharp features. He was the kind of man who filled a space just by standing in it. He pulled his horse to a stop, dismounted with ease, and took a long look around. His gaze lingered on the land, the house. Then, his eyes landed on my father. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Simon let out a breathless chuckle.
Henry,
Dad stepped forward, and just like that, the years melted away. They clasped hands before pulling each other into a firm embrace.
Simon,
Dad said, voice thick with emotion.
look at you.
Simon grinned.
look at you. You haven't changed.
Dad laughed.
That's a damn lie, and you know it.
Simon's gaze shifted, landing on me, then to Jack and Matilda.
These must be your...
He said. Dad nodded.
My pride and joy.
Simon turned to me, his dark eyes settling on mine with quiet curiosity.
You must be Clementine.
His voice was deep, smooth, gentle in a way I hadn't expected.
You have your father's strength and kindness in your eyes.
I managed a small curtsy. It's an honor, Alpha Simon. His smile was warm, almost knowing.
Just Simon, or Uncle Simon, if you prefer. I'm an old friend of your father's.
He looked to Matilda and Jack.
And these must be Jack and Matilda.
Matilda, never shy, ran up and grabbed his hand.
Are you a real alpha? Like a super strong one?
Simon chuckled, his eyes twinkling.
I try to be, little one.
Jack, more reserved, gave a respectful nod.
Welcome, Alpha.
There was something easy about him, despite his status. He didn't carry the arrogance I'd expected from an alpha, but something in the way he looked at me made my stomach twist. I wasn't used to this kind of attention. I was just Clementine, the daughter of an Omega, the girl who worked in the fields. I swallowed, glancing at Simon. You must be tired from the ride. Would you like to come inside? Simon's smile was slow, thoughtful.
Yes, I'd like that.
In the days that followed, Simon spent time with Dad, reminiscing about their childhood, discussing pack matters. He watched Jack fish, complimented Matilda's drawings, and, to my surprise, took an interest in my work.
You have strong hands.
He remarked one afternoon. Before I could react, he reached for my hand, turning it over in his palm. His touch was warm, firm.
Hands that have known hard work.
He said.
That's a rare thing these days.
I pulled my hand back, flustered. It's just what I do. He smiled.
And you do it well, Clementine. You have a good heart. I can see it.
The evening air was thick with the scent of burning wood, the last bits of sunlight slipping behind the hills. Inside our small home, the fire crackled, casting shadows on the rough stone walls. Matilda had fallen asleep curled up in my father's chair, her tiny fingers clutching the edge of my shawl. Jack sat at the table, idly twirling a wooden carving between his fingers, his gaze far away. I was washing the last of the dishes, my sleeves rolled up, hands still damp, when I heard it. A voice. Low, familiar, my father and Simon. I paused, my heartbeat slowing. The voices were coming from the other side of the house, through the slightly open door that led to my father's small quarter.
I'm impressed by Clementine's values and ethics.
Simon's voice was firm, sure.
She's strong, loyal, exactly what I'd want in a daughter-in-law.
Daughter-in-law. I gripped the edge of the sink, breath catching.
Have you chosen a man for her?
Simon asked. There was a small silence before my father's voice, hesitant but warm, replied.
No. She's always been too busy taking care of us to think about herself.
Simon's tone was lighter now.
Then let me offer something. My son Roger.
The room spun. Simon kept talking. Something about strength, about uniting the packs. But I barely heard him. My father's voice, when it came, was filled with something I hadn't heard in years. Pride.
I never thought Clementine would marry into such a strong pack.
And that was it. My fate, sealed in the span of a few words. Simon left the next morning. He had given my father a small bundle wrapped in cloth, photos of his sons. But he hadn't clarified which one was Roger. I hadn't spoken to my father about what I had overheard. I wasn't ready. By midday, my siblings and some of the younger pack members had gathered outside, the bundle of pictures in Jack's hands.
Clementine, come look.
Jack called, grinning.
Simon left pictures of your future husband.
My stomach did an annoying flip. I smiled, stepping forward. Jack untied the cloth and laid the pictures on the wooden bench. Two men stared back at me. The first man was tall and broad-shouldered, his features sharp but not traditionally handsome. He had dark, slightly tousled hair, and his deep-set brown eyes held something steady, something strong. There was no arrogance in his expression, just quiet intensity. His hands, visible in the picture, looked rough, calloused, like a man who worked with them often. The second man stole my breath. Golden hair, striking blue eyes, a face sculpted with impossible perfection. He was the kind of man who turned heads when he entered a room, who knew the power of his own looks. His lips curled into a smirk, full of confidence, full of something dangerous and thrilling. I felt my pulse quicken. Matilda leaned in, her little finger tapping the second picture.
He's really handsome.
A few of the other girls giggled.
He looks like a prince.
Jack smirked.
Well, Clementine, who do you think is Roger?
I swallowed, glancing between the two faces. My instincts told me to choose the one who looked strong, steady. But my eyes kept pulling me back to the handsome one. I closed my eyes and imagined my future. It was the second man's face that came to mind. I lifted my hand and tapped the picture with the golden-haired man. Him. Jack grinned.
Correct answer, that's Roger. Alpha Simon's son, your future husband.
And the other one? I asked curiously.
The other one is Anthony, Simon's foster son, the younger one.
He said, carefully stacking the photos and tying the cloth back around them. Laughter and cheers filled the air as my siblings and pack members chattered excitedly, debating what to wear and planning all the things they'd do when Roger arrived. A crisp autumn breeze rustled through the trees as I stepped outside, the scent of damp earth and burning wood filling the air. My siblings had been talking nonstop since morning, their excitement buzzing like a swarm of bees. Because today, Anthony was arriving. I wasn't sure what to expect from him. He was the beta of the Blood Moon Pack, a position that demanded strength, intelligence, and loyalty. But beyond that, I knew little about him. Only that he was coming to prepare us for Roger's arrival. I pulled my shawl tighter around my shoulders, feeling the weight of uncertainty settle in my chest. The low hum of an engine broke the quiet. A sleek black Mercedes glided down the dirt path, its polished surface gleaming under the sunlight. It looked out of place here, too refined, too modern against the rugged wilderness of Ironclaw. The tires crunched against the gravel as it slowed to a stop in front of me. My siblings, who had been giggling and playfully arguing about what to wear when Roger arrived, suddenly froze.
He's here.
Matilda squealed, her tiny hands clutching my sleeve. The back door swung open without a sound, and Anthony stepped out adjusting his collar. He was in a tailored black coat, crisp shirt, and dark slacks. He looked like he belonged in the world he came from, a world of power, of control. And yet, there was something about him that felt grounded, as if no amount of luxury could strip him of the discipline he carried within. He carried himself with the kind of quiet control that belonged to men who never let their guard down. His broad shoulders briefly filled the doorway before he shut the door behind him, his sharp gaze sweeping over the land like he was taking in every possible detail, every exit, every weakness. The moment his boots touched the ground, my siblings swarmed him.
Are you really Uncle Simon's son?
Matilda blurted out, her hands on her hips. Anthony chuckled, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt.
Yes, I am a foster son.
Matilda giggled.
What is foster son?
She asked, reaching for his leather strap.
You will know when you grow old, little one.
He said, kneeling, letting Matilda poke at the leather strap across his chest. And I had to admit, I wasn't expecting this. He was nothing I had expected. Not rigid, not severe, just effortlessly likable. Unlike Roger's golden perfection, Anthony wasn't the kind of man you noticed at first glance. But once you did, it was hard to look away. I crossed my arms, studying him carefully. He must have felt my stare because he looked up, his dark eyes locking onto mine.
You must be Clementine.
His voice was deep, steady. And you must be Anthony. He grinned.
Glad we got that sorted.
My lips twitched, but I kept my expression neutral. Why did Uncle Simon send you here? Anthony stood, dusting off his hands.
Dad just wants you and your family to be prepared for Roger's arrival.
I frowned. Prepared how?
Just ready.
He said vaguely, then changed the subject.
Can we go inside? I'm starving.
Matilda immediately grabbed his hand, dragging him toward the house.
Come on, Clementine makes the best stew.
Then I'd be a fool to refuse.
Anthony said, casting me a wink. I sighed, trailing behind them. Something about his answer didn't sit right with me. Inside, the fire crackled warmly, casting soft shadows across the room. My siblings and few pack members sat around Anthony like he was some kind of storyteller, hanging on to every word. So, what's Roger like? I asked, handing him a bowl of stew. Anthony took it with a nod of thanks, his expression shifting slightly.
Roger?
He took a moment before answering.
He's strong, smart, honorable. A man who knows his responsibilities and will treat you with the respect you deserve.
His words were careful, practiced, but something about the way he said them made my stomach tighten. He sounds perfect, I murmured, watching his face. Anthony smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes.
He is.
And yet, I wasn't sure if he even believed it himself. Over the next few days, Anthony and I spent more time together. Not out of choice, but because he wanted to make me ready for Roger's visit. And I was going to find out why. One evening, as the sky bled into shades of orange and purple, I was mending a tear in Matilda's favorite dress under the old oak tree. I saw Anthony heading towards me, his eyes sweeping over the greenery.
Hey.
He shouted. I smiled. He stepped closer, sitting beside me, his gaze softened as he spoke.
Clementine.
I glanced at him, my hands working on the fabric.
You have a strength about you, a quiet fire, but if you are to navigate the world Roger moves in, you might need to carry yourself differently.
I frowned. What do you mean? He stood up.
Walk with me?
He said softly. We walked slowly through the twilight, the only sounds the chirping of crickets and the rustling leaves.
Look at yourself.
he said, stopping by the edge of the creek. The water reflected my image, my shoulders slightly hunched, my gaze downcast.
You're hiding yourself, Clementine, as if you're ashamed of something.
I'm not ashamed, I protested, though a little voice inside me whispered that maybe I was. Ashamed of our humble home, our simple life,
Then show it.
he said, his eyes holding mine in the reflection.
Stand tall, lift your chin. Your eyes, they hold so much. Don't let them look away. Imagine a string pulling you up from the crown of your head. Feel the strength in your spine.
He said, smiling. I tried. It felt awkward, unnatural at first, but as I focused on his words, I felt a subtle shift. My shoulders straightened, my gaze lifted.
There.
He said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips.
See the difference? You look confident, like you know your worth.
We spent the next days like that. He showed me how to walk with purpose, how to meet someone's gaze without flinching, how to speak clearly and firmly. It wasn't about becoming someone I wasn't, but about letting the strength I already possessed shine through. Today was the day Roger was coming. The morning air was soft against my skin, carrying the scent of pine needles and something faintly sweet. Wildflowers, maybe, or the apple tree near the fence. My hands worked through my routine, almost on autopilot. I tied back my hair, loose strands curling against my cheek. I reached for my usual linen dress, the one with tiny buttons down the front, simple and clean. But I'd only slipped it halfway on, shoulders still bare, back open, when I heard the door creak behind me. I turned quickly, fabric clutched against my chest. Anthony stood frozen in the doorway. His eyes met mine for a second before flicking away, his jaw tightening.
I'm sorry.
He said, voice low, almost gravelly.
I thought you were dressed.
He turned and walked out before I could say anything. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding, my heart tapping faster than it should. There was something about him, always so in control. But in that 1 second, I saw him falter, and something inside me liked it. After I finished dressing, I found him standing near the stables, arms crossed, eyes on the horizon like he was waiting for a storm. I'm ready, I said softly. He looked at me and nodded, but didn't smile.
I brought something for you.
He held out a long garment bag, the kind I'd only ever seen in town windows. His fingers gripped it tightly, like he wasn't sure if he should be offering it at all. What is it?
A dress.
He said.
Roger's world is different. He's used to polished things. I thought this might help.
I unzipped the bag and blinked. It was a one-piece dress, knee-length, made of smooth navy fabric. The neckline dipped lower than I was used to, and the waist pulled in tight. I ran my fingers along the fabric. It was soft, expensive, foreign. I've never worn anything like this, I whispered.
I know, but trust me, you'll look beautiful.
Anthony said. His voice was steady, but his eyes weren't. They kept flicking to my face, then away, like he didn't want to stare but couldn't help himself. I hesitated, then nodded, because even though this felt nothing like me, I wanted to believe him. The dress clung to my curves perfectly I wasn't used to. My arms felt bare, my knees even more so. I kept tugging the hem down, fidgeting like a child in new shoes.
Stop doing that.
Anthony said as I stepped out into the sunlight. I feel like I'm pretending to be someone else, I mumbled. He opened his mouth to say something, but a sharp engine roar cut him off. A sleek black car pulled into the clearing. Not like Anthony's. This one was flashier, sportier. Like it belonged in a city with glass towers, not among trees and wooden fences. The door opened slowly. Roger stepped out. Tall, blonde, polished. His suit fit like it was stitched just for him. Blue eyes cool as ice, scanning everything before settling on me. And when they did, something flickered in them. He smiled. It was the kind of smile people practiced in mirrors, all charm, no warmth.
You must be Clementine.
He said, walking toward me like he owned the world. I nodded, trying to breathe normally.
Lovely.
He said, reaching out and letting his fingers brush the back of my hand.
Even better than I imagined.
His voice was smooth, but there was something oily beneath it, like honey poured over steel. I could feel Anthony watching. When I looked at him, he was smiling, a genuine smile, but I could say inside he was battling whether Roger will like me or not. For a few minutes, Roger asked me simple things about my hobbies, my work, the kind of life I imagined. He nodded politely, but his tone stayed flat, like he was just ticking boxes. Then he turned to Anthony.
Anthony,
He said with a clipped nod.
I think we should start preparing for the engagement.
Anthony's face lit up. He pulled out his phone like he'd been waiting for this moment all day. He called Uncle Simon right then and there.
Dad,
He said, a smile in his voice.
Roger agreed to the marriage.
Later that evening, while Roger and my father discussed pack politics over brandy, I slipped outside. The sky was dusky pink, stars blinking faintly in the distance. My feet were bare on the cool porch wood. I leaned against the post, tugging at the dress that still felt too tight, too revealing.
Does it hurt?
I jumped. Anthony stepped out of the shadows, his hands in his pockets. What? I asked.
Wearing something that doesn't feel like yours.
I looked down at the dress, then at him. Yeah, I whispered. Like I'm wrapped in someone else's skin. He stepped closer, slowly, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed.
I shouldn't have made you wear it.
He said. His voice was quiet, heavy with something like guilt.
You looked beautiful, but not like yourself. I just thought maybe it'd help him see you.
I swallowed the lump in my throat. It's okay, Anthony. After all, I must adjust according to his preference. He nodded, stepping back.
Good night, Clementine.
He said, voice low, and then he was gone. It was my engagement with Roger. I should have been happy, but it felt like I was walking into someone else's life. The grand hall was draped in gold and deep red, the colors of the blood moon pack. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling, spilling warm light over polished floors and silk-covered tables. People dressed in fine clothes milled around, sipping wine, whispering behind jeweled hands. It was elegant, beautiful. Uncle Simon had taken care of everything himself, sparing my dad from any burden, and I was grateful to him for that. I stood near the center, my hands clenched in my lap. My dress was ivory, made of fabric so delicate I was afraid to breathe too hard. My hair had been styled in soft waves, pinned back with pearls. Every part of me had been polished, adjusted, made to look perfect. For him. Roger stood beside me, tall and sure, his expensive suit tailored to perfection. He looked like a prince out of a storybook. Golden hair neatly styled, sharp blue eyes scanning the room like he owned it. Women stared at him. Some whispered to each other, their gazes flickering toward me with barely hidden envy. If only they knew. Dad was smiling, standing beside Simon. They shook hands, glasses of dark liquor in their free hands. I could hear snippets of their conversation.
She's in good hands.
Our families will be stronger together.
She will be happy.
Then, a silver tray was placed in front of me. The rings. A hush fell over the room. Roger turned to me, his expression unreadable, and took the ring between his fingers. It was a large diamond, a little too much for my taste, but I let him slide it onto my finger anyway. His grip was firm, his touch a little too possessive. I swallowed, my throat tight, and picked up the ring meant for him. My hands trembled slightly as I slid it onto his finger. There, it was done. Applause, smiles, my father's proud eyes. And then, Roger yanked me forward. His grip was firm, almost too much, hands pressing into my hips as he pulled me flush against him. I stumbled slightly, caught off guard by the sudden closeness. His breath was warm against my cheek, but something about it didn't feel right, like the room wasn't meant for this. Before I could react, his lips crashed onto mine, hard, demanding. Pain flared as his teeth scraped against my lip, and I tasted blood. My hands instinctively pushed against his chest, but he held me in place. His hands slid from my shoulders, fingertips tugging at the fabric of my dress, and that's when panic shot through me like lightning. No. With every bit of strength I had, I shoved him back. He stumbled a step, wiping his lips with the back of his hand, that smug smirk still glued to his face like he hadn't just crossed a line. Around us, the grand hall burst into cheers, claps, laughter, glasses clinking. They didn't see it. They didn't hear the breath I sucked in, sharp and shaky. They thought it was just a kiss, some grand romantic display between two people who were supposed to belong to each other. But it wasn't. My gaze snapped to his, burning. "What the hell was that?" I hissed, keeping my voice low so only he could hear. Roger's smirk faltered, realizing he'd miscalculated. He reached for my hand, but I pulled it away. He hesitated.
I got carried away.
I glared at him. His jaw clenched. Then, with a charming smile, one meant to smooth things over, he murmured.
I'm sorry.
I didn't believe him, but I nodded, because I had no other choice. The music started up again and conversations resumed. My father's laughter echoed across the hall, oblivious. But not everyone had missed it. My eyes drifted across the room, drawn by something unseen, and landed on Anthony. He stood near the far wall, half in shadow, his expression unreadable. His dark eyes locked onto mine, something simmering beneath the surface. Displeasure, maybe even anger. Slowly, he stepped forward. The weight of the moment settled as he approached, his movements calm, controlled, yet charged with something deeper. When he reached us, he pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and held it out to me.
Take it, Clementine.
He murmured, his voice low. I touched my lip, my fingers coming away wet, red. Heat flared inside me, a slow burn that spread through my chest like fire catching wind. Anthony turned to Roger, his smile forced, his voice barely above a whisper.
She's yours, Roger. She is not running anywhere. Please don't behave like this, not in front of everyone.
There was something almost pleading in his tone, meant only for us. Roger's jaw tightened, a flash of irritation in his eyes, but he masked it quickly. He gave a stiff nod, though I could feel the tension rolling off him like a storm waiting to break. When the ceremony ended, Simon raised his glass and spoke in a voice that carried through the hall.
The wedding will take place in a few months.
He announced, smiling.
Until then, Clementine will stay with us in Moonvail Pack.
My heart sank.
That sounds perfect.
Dad said, pleased. Perfect. I bit the inside of my cheek. Roger placed a hand on the small of my back. To anyone watching, it probably looked like a loving gesture, but his fingers pressed just a little too firmly, a silent reminder of who held the power now. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced a smile, because that's what was expected of me. The ride to Moonvail was quiet, except for Uncle Simon's voice filling the space. He kept talking, smiling, trying to make me feel at ease.
You're going to love it there, Clementine.
He said, his voice warm.
We've made every arrangement to make sure you're comfortable.
I nodded, forcing a small smile. That's very kind of you. Maybe he meant well. Maybe he really wanted me to be happy. Roger sat beside me, his arms stretched across the center console, fingers drumming against the leather with an impatient rhythm, like he was counting down the seconds until we reached the fortress. And Anthony was in the front seat next to the driver, staring out the window. Every now and then he glanced back when Uncle Simon spoke, nodding silently, his expression unreadable. The fortress came into view before I was ready. It wasn't just big, it was massive. A towering structure of dark stone, standing strong against the night sky. The kind of place that had been built to withstand wars, to protect something important, or to keep something inside. The luxurious Mercedes pulled up to the entrance and the guards outside straightened immediately. They bowed deeply, their voices echoing in unison.
Welcome, our future Luna.
I almost flinched. I wasn't used to this kind of respect. Before I could say anything, Roger stepped out of the car first, adjusting the cuffs of his expensive suit like he owned the world. Then, he turned and extended a hand toward me. For a second, I hesitated. Then, I placed my fingers in his palm, letting him help me up. His grip was firm, yet gentle, a stark contrast to the way he had treated me earlier. Anthony walked behind us, his hands shoved in his pockets casually. The air smelled of pine and something faintly floral. Inside, the fortress was just as grand as I'd expected. High ceilings, marble floors, golden chandeliers dripping with crystals. Servants lined up, their faces filled with excitement. Simon clapped a hand on my shoulder.
Come, let me show you your room.
I followed him through the long halls, feeling my heart beat a little too fast. The walls were decorated with old paintings, some of them portraits of past alphas, their eyes sharp and calculating even from the canvas. Finally, we stopped in front of a large set of doors. Simon pushed them open with a smile.
This
He said proudly.
is all yours.
I stepped inside and felt my breath catch. The room was beautiful. A massive bed with silk sheets, floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the forest, a fireplace already lit, making the space feel warm. Everything was elegant, perfect, a little too perfect. I walked toward the closet, tracing my fingers over the polished wood before opening it. My stomach twisted at what I saw inside. Rows and rows of dresses, every color, every fabric, every design imaginable. Each one expensive, delicate, meant for someone who was supposed to be admired, displayed. Not me. The shoe rack was the same. Heels, flats, boots. So many pairs that I knew I could go a whole year without repeating a single one. I turned slowly, taking it all in. The jewelry on the vanity, the perfumes lined up neatly, the soft rugs beneath my feet. I was supposed to be grateful, so I smiled and turned to Simon. Thank you. This is more than I could have ever imagined. His eyes softened.
You deserve it, my dear.
I wanted to believe him. I glanced at Roger, leaning casually against the doorway, exuding the effortless charm that still had the power to make my heart race, despite everything. He flashed me a smile, smooth and confident.
Be ready for dinner.
I forced a smile in return, my voice steady. Okay. Dinner had been perfect, at least on the surface. The dining hall was filled with laughter, polite conversation, and the clinking of silverware against fine porcelain. Simon sat at the head of the table, radiating authority. Anthony sat beside Simon, quiet and steady, like always. Roger, to my right, played the part of the charming fiancé, his easy smile never slipping, his words smooth as honey. But the air shifted the moment I was introduced to Roger's stepmother and stepsister. Lady Eleanor and Isabel. Their names were elegant, their clothes even more so. Silk gowns that draped like liquid gold, expensive jewelry that caught the candlelight just right. But their smiles? Hollow, forced, like they'd rather be anywhere else but here. I greeted them with all the grace I could muster. "My lady," I said, nodding to Lady Eleanor. She barely looked at me before offering a stiff nod in return. Isabel, younger but just as cold, eyed me with a tilt of her chin, her painted lips barely twitching into a smile.
"So, you're Clementine."
She said it like my name left a bitter taste in her mouth. Still, I smiled. "I am." They didn't say much after that, but I didn't miss the way they exchanged looks throughout dinner, or how Eleanor's fingers tapped against the tablecloth whenever Roger leaned in to whisper something in my ear. I wasn't stupid. They didn't approve. I just didn't know why. From across the table, I caught a glimpse of Anthony. He was eating roasted chicken, chewing slowly, thoughtfully, like he wasn't just tasting the food, but thinking through something deeper. The candlelight flickered across his face, casting soft shadows over his cheekbones. His eyes stayed locked on the plate in front of him, but I could tell. He was hearing everything. Every shift in tone, every cold smiles, every loaded silence. It was like his body was here, but his mind was somewhere else, measuring the room. After dinner, I stepped outside onto the terrace, letting the cool night air soothe the tension in my chest. Stars stretched across the sky, and the scent of jasmine drifted on the breeze. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply, letting myself have this moment of peace. A voice pulled me back.
I should leave for my house.
I turned. Anthony stood at the bottom of the stone steps, hands in his pockets, his dark eyes watching me. "You don't live here?" I asked, surprised. He shook his head.
I left the fortress long time ago. I only came to prepare you and your family for Roger's arrival. My home isn't far.
I wanted to ask why. The question sat heavy on my tongue, but the words caught in my throat. I didn't want him to go. His presence was steady, familiar. And with everything feeling so uncertain, that steadiness mattered more than I wanted to admit. He must have noticed my hesitation because his voice softened as he added,
If you ever need anything, call me. I'll be here at once.
His voice was low, reassuring. I nodded, feeling something warm and tight in my chest. Anthony held my gaze for a second longer, then left without another word. I walked toward my room, my mind still lingering on him. But just as I was about to turn the corner, voices caught my attention. Angry voices. I paused, my fingers tightening around the fabric of my dress. It was Uncle Simon and Lady Eleanor. I took a step closer, staying in the shadows, my breath shallow.
"Went to meet your childhood friend and fixed Roger's marriage to an Omega's daughter?"
Her voice was sharp, dripping with disdain. I froze. Simon's tone was calm but firm.
Clementine is not just any Omega's daughter. She is kind, hardworking, and carries herself with grace.
A sharp scoff.
"Grace? She has no status, no lineage. How dare you bring her into this family? Do you know how humiliating this is? A girl like that, standing next to my son?"
My throat tightened. Simon exhaled.
Roger needs someone like her, someone with strength, with values.
"With nothing.
Her voice cut through the air like a blade.
She brings nothing. No wealth, no power, no noble blood. Do you think that girl belongs in this household? In our world?"
Silence. Then, softer, more vicious.
"She is not one of us, Simon, and she never will be."
My vision blurred. I turned before I could hear more, my heart pounding, my legs moving on their own. I didn't stop until I reached my room. I closed the door, my fingers trembling as I locked it behind me. My chest ached, something heavy pressing against my ribs. I had known. Deep down, I had always known. No matter how many beautiful dresses they put in my closet, no matter how grand the fortress was, I would never truly belong here. I was an outsider, a girl they barely tolerated, a mistake they had to endure. I pressed my palm against my lips, trying to hold back the sob. But it broke through anyway, a quiet, painful sound. The walls felt too tall, the silence too loud. I sank onto the bed, curling my fingers into the soft sheets. Maybe Roger hadn't meant to hurt me. Maybe this had been out of his control. Maybe he hadn't even known his stepmother felt this way. Days passed, and I tried my best to adjust to my new life in the fortress. I kept my head down, did everything I was expected to do, and avoided trouble. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling of being unwanted. Eleanor and Isabella didn't hide their feelings toward me. At first, it was subtle. The way they barely acknowledged my presence, the cold glances, the way they left rooms whenever I entered. But then, it became more obvious. Eleanor would give instructions to the maids like I wasn't even standing there, making decisions about the house without consulting me. Isabella would invite guests and pretend I wasn't part of the family, laughing and whispering behind my back. And Roger, he had always been distant, like someone standing in the same room, but with his thoughts miles away. I felt lonely in a way I hadn't felt before. Even when I had nothing, at least I had my father, my home. Here, I had no one. Roger had left early that morning, gone before I even woke up. No note, no message, just gone. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the heavy curtains that blocked out the morning sun. The silence in the room was suffocating. Before I could overthink it, I grabbed my phone and called Anthony. His voice came through after 2 rings.
Clementine?
"Where do you stay?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. There was a pause. Then,
Right now, I'm in my music studio.
a music studio? I hadn't expected that.
Do you want to come?
He asked. I hesitated, my fingers curling into the sheets. Did I? Yes.
All right, I'll send a car.
The drive to Anthony's studio wasn't long, but it felt like stepping into another world. The fortress was cold, rigid, full of rules and expectations. But when I walked into Anthony's studio, it was the complete opposite. Warm, lived in, personal. The walls were lined with shelves filled with records and old books. A grand piano stood in one corner, while a sleek recording booth took up another. Guitars leaned against the walls, and sheets of music were scattered over a wooden desk. Anthony stood by a mixing console, wearing a plain black t-shirt and jeans. He looked different here, more at ease, more himself. He smiled when he saw me.
Come on, let me show you around.
He walked me through the space, explaining the equipment, the recording process, how music was made. He showed me the microphones, the soundproof booths, the orchestra section where live music was recorded. His voice was animated, full of passion, and for a while, I forgot everything else. But then, he stopped. His smile faded just a little.
You seem distracted.
My breath caught in my throat. No one had asked me that. No one had noticed. Not even Roger. I swallowed hard, my hands twisting together. It's nothing. Anthony tilted his head slightly, his sharp eyes studying me.
Clem.
The way he said it made something inside me crack. No one called me that here. I turned away, blinking quickly, but it was no use. The tears came anyway. His expression shifted, his brows pulled together in concern, and before I could stop myself, the words spilled out. I told him everything. How Eleanor ignored me, how Isabella treated me like an outsider, how the fortress felt like a cage, a place where I wasn't welcome. Anthony didn't interrupt, he just listened. And when I finally finished, when my voice wavered and my hands trembled, tears spilled out all over my face. His hands lifted, hesitating, as if he wanted to reach out and wipe my tears. But then, slowly, reluctantly, his fingers curled into fists, like he was trying to regain control. A moment later, they dropped to his sides, as if touching me wasn't his place. His voice was quiet, edged with something heavy.
I never thought they would treat you like this.
I wiped the tears from my face. Why did you leave the fortress? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes.
I was 10 when I lost my parents.
He said.
My father was the alpha of the Moon Howl Pack. When he died, Dad Simon adopted me as his own.
He paused.
But Eleanor and Isabella never saw me as family. To them, I was a burden.
My chest tightened.
They treated me like a servant,
He continued.
asked me to clean the house, wipe the tables. I never told Dad. I didn't want to cause trouble.
He let out a slow breath.
I treated Isabella like my little sister. I tried, but she never treated me like a brother.
His hands curled into fists, then relaxed.
When I was old enough, I started driving a taxi. Simon told me I didn't need to, but I wanted my own money, my own freedom.
He glanced at the studio around us.
It took me years to save up, but it was never enough to build a house.
I watched him, my heart aching.
One day, Dad found out.
He smiled again, but this time it was real.
He was furious about how I had been treated by Eleanor and Isabella. He helped me build my own house, and he gifted me the studio.
He looked away, his voice softer now.
For me, he is next to God.
I didn't know what to say. A strange kind of sadness settled in my chest, but along with it, something else. Something warm. Sympathy. Understanding. You didn't deserve that, I said quietly. Neither of us did. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at the dress Roger had picked for me. It was deep red, tight and too fitting, short, barely covering my hips. The neckline and the backline dipped lower than I was used to, leaving slightly to imagination. It clung to my skin like it didn't belong there, like it wasn't meant for someone like me. Still, I wore it, because he smiled when he handed it to me, said,
You'll look stunning in this.
and I wanted to believe it. The car ride to the club was quiet. He scrolled through his phone. I played with the hem of my dress, trying not to tug it down too obviously. The city lights flickered past us like old memories, fast and blurry. When we arrived, the bass from inside the club was thumping through the walls. The moment we stepped in, everything felt loud. People, music, perfume, lights. It swallowed me whole. Roger seemed at home, like he belonged here. He led me to the bar and ordered drinks. I held mine loosely, barely sipping. That's when they spotted him. A group of girls, already tipsy and giggling, came up to us like bees to honey. Roger smiled wide, arms thrown open.
Ladies!
They all squealed and hugged him. He introduced me like I was a tag-along.
This is Clementine, my fiancée.
The word didn't land the way I thought it would. Not one of them looked surprised. And none of them looked threatened. I smiled politely, nodding. One girl's perfume hit me so hard I nearly coughed. They were all beautiful, loud, wild, bold. The kind of girls who knew how to take up space. I felt like wallpaper. We sat in a booth. I took the corner seat. They filled the rest. And Roger? He was dead center, soaking it all in. At some point, a girl with long dark hair, Sarah, I think, slid her hand into Roger's lap while laughing at something he said. My stomach dropped. He didn't move her hand. He just smiled. I looked away, pretended I didn't see it. Everyone ordered more drinks. Round after round, I nursed the same glass. Roger pushed another toward me.
Come on, just one more.
I shook my head. I'm okay. He was already turning back to the others, and then Sarah grabbed his hand.
Let's dance.
They slipped onto the dance floor, and the rest followed. I was left alone at the table. The music changed, something slow but full of heat. I watched from the booth as Sarah pressed into Roger's chest. His hands moved down her back. She leaned up and whispered something in his ear, laughing. He didn't pull away. My heart twisted in ways I can't explain. Jealousy burned hot in my chest, but beneath it was something worse. Humiliation. I started drinking, sip after sip. I lost count. They moved together like they'd done it before, like she knew exactly where his hands would land. And maybe she did. I felt like a fool, a dressed-up, uncomfortable fool. I pulled my phone from my purse, hands slightly shaky. Scrolled to Anthony's name and hit call. He picked up fast.
Clementine?
His voice was calm, familiar. I need you to talk to me, I said, half laughing, half holding back tears.
Where are you?
At a party, with Roger. There was a pause. Then,
Where's Roger?
I glanced at the dance floor. He's dancing. I laughed again, bitter this time. With Sarah. Anthony didn't speak right away, but I could feel his breath catch through the phone. I slumped deeper into the booth. I wore the dress he picked. It's too short. Even shorter than you brought me last time. I hated it. But I wore it.
Clementine.
They're so close, Anthony. He's touching her like I'm not even here. My voice cracked. I felt the tears start to come.
Stay there.
He said quietly.
I'm coming to get you.
No, you don't have to.
I want to.
I closed my eyes. Something warm stirred in my chest. Not love, not quite, but something like safety. While I waited, I watched Roger and Sarah dance. I had wrapped myself in his warmth and called it love, but tonight, it felt like frost. The music was still blaring when I reached for the glass again. My fingers wrapped around the cold rim. My hand shook a little, maybe from the alcohol, or maybe from everything I was feeling at once. Jealousy, embarrassment, anger, heartbreak. But before I could bring the glass to my lips, a hand caught my wrist. Firm,
That's enough.
Anthony said. His voice cut through the noise like warm thunder, low, calm, and not asking. I blinked at him. He wasn't supposed to be here yet, but there he was, standing in that club with his messy dark hair, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, eyes locked on me like I was the only thing that mattered in the room. And just like that, I started crying again. Not sobbing, not loud, just those silent, painful tears that roll without warning. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around me like I was something fragile. His scent hit me, clean soap and something familiar, like old pine or the inside of a warm car on a cold day.
Let's get you out of here.
He whispered. I nodded, but when I tried to stand, my legs buckled. The carpet beneath my heels blurred and I tilted sideways. Before I could hit the floor, Anthony caught me. His arms closed around me, strong, steady. His hands found my arms, his fingers warm against my skin. One hand slid up to the back of my neck, and for a second, our faces were so close, I could feel the heat of his breath on my cheek. I didn't move. Neither did he. He exhaled through his nose like he was holding something in. Then he tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, gently, the way someone might handle a glass ornament. He guided me through the crowd like I was breakable, one arm tight around my waist. Outside, the cold night air sobered me a little, but the ache in my chest still throbbed. He opened the car door and helped me in like it was second nature. The ride was quiet. I leaned my head against the window, watching the streetlights pass. My heart was heavy, like it was full of stones. I didn't say anything. He didn't push. But the way his eyes kept flicking toward me at red lights said enough. When we pulled into his driveway, I didn't move. I just sat there, eyes half closed, hands limp in my lap. He got out and opened the passenger door.
Clem, come on.
I shook my head, a tiny movement. Too tired. He crouched in front of me.
All right.
He said softly.
All right.
The next thing I knew, he slid his arms under me, one hand under my thighs, the other behind my shoulders. Anthony.
I've got you.
He lifted me like I weighed nothing. My cheek pressed against his chest, and I could hear his heartbeat. Steady. Sure. I wrapped my fingers lightly around the fabric of his shirt. He smelled like safety, like everything I hadn't felt in weeks. As he carried me up the porch steps, I closed my eyes. His hands were warm on my skin, even through the thin fabric of my dress. One hand slipped just slightly as he adjusted me higher, his fingers brushing the back of my upper thigh. He paused for half a second, then kept walking. Inside, the lights were dim. His house was quiet, lived in. A jacket on the armrest, a glass on the coffee table, shoes by the door. He carried me to the bedroom, laid me down gently on the bed like he was afraid I'd break. Our cheeks brushed as he leaned in to adjust the pillow beneath my head. He paused, just for a heartbeat, before pulling back. For a moment, our faces were so close I could see the faint freckles scattered across his cheek, the way his lashes curled slightly at the ends. His eyes flicked down to my lips, just for a second. Then he tucked the blanket over me and said,
You're safe here, okay?
My chest ached at how kind he was, how careful. He brushed my hair back from my face. His hands were calloused, but his touch was slow and gentle. Then he got up and walked out. I heard him in the hallway murmuring, the soft click of his phone unlocking. Then,
Dad,
he said. His voice dropped low.
Clementine's here. She went out with Roger. Yeah, I know. I just didn't like how it sounded.
A pause.
She's safe now. I'll bring her to the fortress tomorrow.
Another pause.
No, she doesn't know I called. She's asleep.
His voice cracked a little, like he was trying not to sound worried. I curled tighter into the blanket. Somewhere deep inside, something twisted painfully. Not from what Roger did, but from how good it felt to be looked after by someone else. I wasn't sure if I was falling for Anthony, but I knew I was falling out of love with the idea of Roger. The morning light poured in through the half-open curtains, soft and slow like it was afraid to disturb anything. My head was pounding. Not the kind of pain that comes from a hangover, though that was there too. It was deeper, heavier, right in the middle of my chest. I blinked and turned my face toward the sound of soft breathing. Anthony. He was curled up in the chair beside the bed, arms folded across his chest, head leaning back against the wooden frame. His lips were parted slightly, and the stubble on his jaw had grown a little since last night. He looked tired, still wearing the same clothes, his shirt wrinkled, his brows slightly furrowed even in sleep. He'd stayed. All night. A jacket hung off the back of the chair, and a blanket was barely draped over his legs. I remembered the way he carried me, like I was something he didn't want to drop or damage. I remembered the way his hand brushed my thigh, the way he looked at me but didn't kiss me. I felt safe. But then I remembered how Roger danced with Sarah, how his hands moved to her curves like he knew each of them forever. I sat up slowly, the sheets falling to my lap. My hair was tangled from sleep, and my dress from last night now looked too short. I felt exposed, raw, like my skin was thinner today. And then it hit me like a brick to the chest. Anthony knew. He knew who Roger really was. I swung my legs over the bed and stood up. My knees wobbled slightly, but I pushed through the dizziness. I walked over to him and stared for a second. He looked so peaceful. "Anthony," I said, my voice flat but shaking underneath. He stirred on the chair, slow at first, like he was coming out of a dream. His eyes blinked open, confused, then widened when he saw me standing there.
Clem, hey!
He said, sitting up straighter, rubbing the sleep from his face. His voice was soft. Too soft. I stared at him. My arms folded so tight across my chest it felt like I was holding my own ribs together. "You knew," I said. His brows drew in slightly.
What?
"You knew about Roger," I said, louder now, heat curling under my skin. "You knew what he was like. The drinking, the girls, the lies." He didn't say anything, but his face, it broke, slowly, painfully. His eyes were wet, red around the edges, and I hated that I still noticed. Hated that even now I could feel the ache in him like it was mine too. "You knew," I whispered. "You knew what he was, and you let me walk right into it." He stood up fast, like he couldn't bear to sit with it. I crossed the room and grabbed the front of his shirt, my hands trembling as I clutched the fabric. "Do you even know what that did to me?" My voice broke, raw and aching. "Do you have any idea how it felt? Waking up every day thinking maybe this wasn't a mistake? Telling myself to be patient with him because you said he was perfect?" His gaze dropped to the floor. He didn't speak. "I trusted you," I whispered, voice trembling. "I believed you, Anthony. You. The only person I ever felt safe with in this goddamn place." Silence. The kind that hums in your ears when your heart is breaking. Then, finally, he looked up, his eyes glistening with tears, guilt etched in every nerve of his body.
Dad wanted you to marry him.
He said quietly.
He thought maybe you could change Roger.
I let go of his shirt, and before I know, my hands met his cheek, hard. I didn't even think. I didn't plan it. It just happened. Because something inside me couldn't hold the hurt anymore. He didn't flinch. His head turned with the hit, but he stood there, breathing hard through his nose, his jaw clenched like he'd been waiting for it. Tears burned in my eyes. I hated them. I hated that he could still make me feel something. "Don't you dare," I said. "Don't you dare make this sound noble, like I was some kind of redemption project for a man you knew would destroy me." I turned away, wiping my tears with the back of my hand, angry at him, angry at myself for still crying. But before I could take a step, his hand shot out and caught my wrist.
Clem!
He whispered, voice shaking. I froze. And then, without thinking, I clutched his shirt, pulling him close like my heart didn't know how to hate him properly. His arms wrapped around me tight, his chin resting gently on top of my head. I broke. The sobs came fast, raw and messy, soaking into his chest. A tear slipped down his cheek, soaking into my hair, warm and silent. He didn't say a word. Just held me there like he didn't deserve it but couldn't let go either. His fingers threaded through my hairs gently as if he could shield me from everything that had fallen apart. I pulled back slowly and he let go of me, my eyes searching his. "You don't get to check on me," I said, voice thick. "Don't ask me if I'm okay. Don't pretend like this hurts you. Don't look at me like that."
Clem, please.
"No, I thought we are friends, but we are not." And with that, I turned around and walked toward the door. My heels echoed on the wooden floor. He didn't follow. He just stood there, like he was rooted to the spot. The front door creaked as I opened it, and the morning chill hit me square in the face. I walked fast, past the garden, past the street signs, past the version of myself that still believed in second chances. By the time I reached the fortress, the sun was bright and sharp in the sky, but I felt numb. I walked through the gates and found Roger sitting in the courtyard, slouched in a metal chair like he had nowhere to be, a phone in one hand, laughing. The sound made my stomach twist. I stepped forward. "Who are you talking to?" He looked up, surprised.
Clementine, you all right?
I reached out and snatched the phone right out of his hand,
What the hell?
and there it was. Sarah.
Hey, last night was fun. Never thought we would meet again.
My throat dried up. My fingers shook around the phone. I looked at him. His stupid, smug face. "Who is she?" He leaned back in the chair.
Sarah? She's my ex.
I blinked. "Your ex?" He nodded like it meant nothing.
Yeah.
Like it was a joke. Like my heart wasn't sitting in my hands, still beating. I let the phone fall to the ground. He didn't even flinch. Everything in me wanted to scream, but all I could do was whisper, "And why are you talking to her now?" He shrugged, too casually.
We were just talking, like friends.
"Like friends?" I repeated, my voice sharp. "That's how you act with your friends at a party? Letting her touch you like she owned you?" His mouth opened, guilt flashing across his face.
Clementine,
Before he could finish, Simon's authoritative voice sliced through the tension.
What's going on here?
Simon approached, his face a mask of displeasure. His eyes, usually kind, were now hard as they locked onto Roger. Roger shifted uncomfortably under Simon's gaze.
It's nothing, Dad. Just a misunderstanding.
Simon's eyes narrowed.
Anthony told me everything.
At the mention of Anthony, Roger's jaw tightened, a flicker of anger flashing in his eyes. Simon continued, his voice firm.
Aren't you ashamed of your actions?
Roger's fists clenched at his sides, his knuckles turning white. He cast a quick glance in my direction, his eyes pleading, but I looked away, my heart aching. Simon sighed, the weight of disappointment evident in his posture.
I'm leaving the territory for a while, but hear me, Roger.
He said, his voice low and commanding.
Make sure you don't hurt Clementine.
Roger nodded stiffly, his face a mask of suppressed emotions. Simon then turned to me, his expression softening.
Clementine, my dear, be patient with Roger. He has his flaws, but I believe he can change.
I nodded, though my heart was heavy with doubt. As Simon departed, the room fell into a strained silence. Roger exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. But I didn't wait. I turned on my heel, throat tight, heart thudding like it was trying to climb out of my chest. Reaching my room, I closed the door behind me, leaning against it as a heavy sigh escaped my lips. Roger never really chose me, and Anthony never told me. But the worst part? I kept thinking about Anthony. How his voice cracked. How he stood there in silence when I lashed out. How he never once tried to defend himself. The way he held me like he could piece me together. Days had slipped by, each one stretching longer than the last. No matter how hard I tried, thoughts of Anthony clung to me like a shadow. His absence was a constant ache, a reminder of the rift I'd caused. Regret gnawed at me, each memory of our last encounter replaying in my mind like a broken record. Today was Anthony's birthday. The thought of not reaching out felt unbearable. I needed to see him, to apologize. As evening approached, I chose a simple yet elegant dress, a soft blue. The fabric was gentle against my skin, its modest cut reflecting my subdued mood. I let my hair fall in loose waves over my shoulders, a quick swipe of red lipstick just enough to feel bold but not loud. I glanced at the mirror. Finally, today, I looked like myself again. Stepping into the dimly lit hallway of the fortress, the distant murmur of conversations and clinking silverware echoed from the dining hall. The scent of roasted meat and herbs lingered in the air, a stark contrast to the turmoil in my heart. Just as I reached the grand entrance, a voice, sharp and laced with disdain, halted me.
Where are you going at this hour?
Lady Eleanor's tone was as cold as the marble floors beneath us. I turned to face her, noting the arched brow and the slight curl of her lips. She stood poised, draped in an opulent gown of deep burgundy, her hair styled to perfection. "It's Anthony's birthday," I replied, striving for a neutral tone. A mirthless laugh escaped her lips.
Anthony, you're going to a servant's birthday? Clementine, please.
My jaw tensed. I kept my voice even. "He's not a servant." She took a step forward.
Then what is he? A stray? You want to sit with him and his drunk friends in some damp little room eating dry cake?
She stepped closer, her eyes locked into mine.
It's beneath you to associate with such company.
I stared at her, but inside, I was burning. Not because of her words, but because of the ache I hadn't been able to shake for days. The way Anthony's face haunted me. Silent, broken, still. The way I left things. The way I hurt him. The way I missed him. I tilted my chin high, squared my shoulders, meeting her gaze head-on. "With all due respect, Lady Eleanor, I disagree." Her eyes narrowed, lips pressing into a thin line.
Do as you wish,
She said curtly, turning on her heel and disappearing into the shadows of the corridor. The cool night air greeted me as I stepped outside, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of blooming jasmine. The path to Anthony's home was familiar, lined with towering oaks, whose leaves whispered secrets to the wind. The distant chirping of crickets provided a melancholic melody to my thoughts. Upon reaching his house, I heard voices inside. Laughter, glass clinking. Someone was playing the guitar, badly. I noticed a man at the entrance humming a tune to himself. His attire was simple, a well-worn tunic and trousers, but there was a warmth in his demeanor that was immediately inviting. As our eyes met, he broke into a genuine smile.
"Clementine."
He greeted, his voice rich and familiar. I hesitated, searching his face for recognition. "I'm sorry. Have we met before?" He chuckled softly, shaking his head.
"No, but Anthony speaks of you often. It's as if I know you already."
A warmth spread through my chest, both from the man's kind words and the realization of Anthony's feelings. The weight of my earlier regret felt heavier now.
"He's been waiting. No, we all have."
The man said with a warm smile. "Waiting for me?" I asked, surprised. He nodded.
"He said he won't cut the cake until you show up."
Then he stepped aside, gently motioning me in. Something about the way he said it tugged at something deep inside me. My chest tightened, just a little. I gave him a small, grateful nod and stepped into the cozy warmth of the house. The warmth enveloped me immediately. Anthony sat at the center, surrounded by friends who were animatedly attempting to lift his spirits. He offered them polite smiles, but there was a noticeable distance in his eyes. The untouched cake rested on a nearby table, its candles unlit. As I entered, Anthony's gaze lifted, and a flicker of genuine happiness crossed his face. His friends turned, their expressions shifting from surprise to warm recognition.
You came.
Anthony said, his voice tinged with disbelief and hope. I nodded, my voice soft. I had to. One of his friends, A woman with a mischievous grin chimed in.
Now that she's here, can we finally cut the cake?
Anthony shot her a playful glare, a silent plea for discretion, but she merely chuckled in response. Together, Anthony and I approached the cake. Our hands brushed as we both reached for the knife, sending a subtle shiver up my spine. We cut into the cake amidst cheers and applause, the room filling with a newfound energy. As the evening progressed, I found myself unexpectedly at ease among Anthony's friends. They went out of their way to include me in their conversations, sharing stories and laughter. The initial apprehension I felt melted away, replaced by a comforting sense of belonging. Anthony stayed close, his presence a constant source of warmth. Our interactions were laced with unspoken words, lingering glances, and subtle touches that spoke volumes. The barriers we'd built between us seemed to crumble, leaving raw emotions in their wake. As the night wore on, the festivities began to wind down. Guests bid their farewells, leaving Anthony and me in the quiet aftermath. The room, once filled with chatter and laughter, now held a serene stillness. Anthony turned to me, his eyes searching mine.
Thank you for coming. It means more than you know.
I stepped closer, the distance between us almost non-existent. I'm sorry for everything, for the things I said, for hurting you. His brown eyes shadowed, filled with a pain that mirrored my own.
No, Clementine, it's all my fault.
He took a slow, deliberate breath.
But tonight felt right.
His voice was low, husky, sending a shiver down my spine. His eyes searched mine, as if looking for an answer he wasn't sure he'd find. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. It did. I managed. My gaze locked on his. Being near him, even after the chaos of the evening, felt like coming home, a home I never knew I was searching for. I felt so comfortable here, Anthony, in your presence. I never felt that with Roger. The comparison felt like a betrayal, yet it was the undeniable truth. He nodded slowly, his gaze flickering down to my lips and then back to my eyes. He still maintained a small distance, as if afraid to close the space between us.
I know it's...
Before he could finish the sentence, something inside me snapped. The longing, the confusion, the sheer intensity of my feelings overwhelmed my hesitation. I acted on impulse, reaching out and gently pulling his face closer. My lips met his, a soft, tentative touch that quickly deepened. It wasn't a fiery, passionate kiss like the stolen ones, but something else entirely. It was a seeking, a comforting, a silent acknowledgement of the connection that had been growing between us like a stubborn wildflower. For a moment, Anthony gave in. His arms, hesitant at first, slid around my waist, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. I could feel the solid beat of his heart against mine, the warmth of his breath on my face. His fingers tangled in the loose strands of my hair, a small, intimate gesture that sent a wave of tenderness through me. The world around us seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of us, bathed in the soft glow of the moon. But then, just as quickly as it began, he broke the kiss. He stepped back, his breathing ragged, his eyes filled with conflict.
No.
He whispered, his voice thick with regret.
No, I can't.
A sharp pang of hurt shot through me. Why? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. He looked away, his gaze fixed on the dark trees.
Dad chose you for Roger. I can't betray my dad, Clementine. He's done too much for me. He took me in when I had nothing.
His loyalty, I knew, ran deep as the roots of those ancient pines. And what about me, Anthony? I pleaded, my voice rising with desperation. Can't you see? I can't stay with Roger. He's not what you made me think he was. The memory of his cruel words, His entitled arrogance still stung. Anthony's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. We both knew it was truth. Tears welled in my eyes, blurring my vision. Anthony. I can't stay with him. I don't love him. I love... Before I could finish the sentence, before I could utter the words that felt both terrifying and liberating, Anthony reached out, his fingers gently pressing against my lips.
Don't say that, Clem. Don't.
He said, his voice strained, raw with emotion. Tears, mirroring my own, slipped down his cheeks, catching the moonlight like tiny diamonds. The unspoken words hung in the air between us, heavy and charged. The truth that we both felt, but neither dared to fully embrace. A cold dread washed over me. Fine, I said, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion that was tearing me apart inside. I turned away from him, from the man I wasn't allowed to love, the moonlight suddenly feeling cold and unforgiving on my back. Each step I took away from him felt like tearing a piece of myself away. The longing to turn back, to beg him to reconsider, was a physical ache. But I kept my feet moving forward into the darkness. The days that followed, I tried to adjust to the idea of Roger. I told myself that maybe that one day Roger would see me, take care of me, respect me just like Anthony did. But every interaction felt like walking on eggshells. He was charming when he wanted to be, especially when Dad Simon was around, but underneath that veneer, the arrogance and the casual cruelty were always simmering. He'd always kept a distance, a polite but firm boundary. I almost preferred that. It felt safer. But then came the invitation to the Blood Moon Pack's late-night gathering, a party. My stomach churned at the thought. It wasn't my world. Our celebrations in the Ironclaw Pack were simple, filled with laughter and shared stories around a bonfire. This felt like something else entirely. Roger insisted. He said it was important for appearances, for solidifying the connection between our packs. He even picked out a dress for me, a shimmering emerald green gown that felt foreign against my skin. It was beautiful, no doubt, but it wasn't me. The club was everything I'd imagined and dreaded. Loud music pulsed through the air, the scent of expensive perfume and spilled liquor hung heavy, and people moved with a careless energy that made me feel like an outsider looking in. Roger, dressed in fine black clothes that made his blonde hair seem even brighter, seemed completely at home. He moved through the crowd with an easy confidence, stopping to chat and laugh with people I didn't know. He offered me drinks, strong, sweet concoctions that made my head spin. I took small sips, trying to stay clear-headed amidst the swirling chaos. Roger, however, wasn't so cautious. He drank freely, his laughter growing louder, his movements becoming more unsteady. By the time we finally left, the moon was high in the sky, casting a stark light on Roger's flushed face. He was clearly intoxicated, his words slurring slightly as he led me through the grand halls of the Blood Moon Pack's main house. He steered me, not towards the guest rooms as I'd expected, but towards his own chambers. My heart pounded in my chest. "Roger, where are we going?" He just grinned, a loose, unsettling expression.
Just come, Clementine.
Roger led me to his fancy room, pulled out a chair for me. He gestured to a plush armchair by the fireplace.
Please, Clementine, sit.
I sat stiffly, my emerald gown feeling suddenly heavy and wrong. He knelt in front of me, his blue eyes unnervingly intense as his hand reached out, his fingers so lightly brushing my ankle that it sent a shiver, not of pleasure, but of unease, up my spine.
You are so pretty, Clementine.
He murmured, his voice low and husky, his gaze sweeping over every inch of me. I couldn't say anything. My mind was racing, trying to decipher this sudden shift in his demeanor. Why the politeness? It felt like a predator toying with its prey. Then, in one swift movement, he pulled me from the chair and into his arms. His hand slid to my waist, his grip firm, possessive, pulling me flush against his chest. And then he kissed me. It wasn't the tender exploration I'd briefly shared with Anthony. This was hard, demanding, his lips crushing mine, his tongue invading my mouth with possessiveness. It felt like he was staking a claim. He pulled me towards the massive bed, the silk sheets whispering under our weight. He leaned over me, his hands gripping my arms, pinning me against the soft mattress. I looked up at his face, his blue eyes gleaming with a strange mixture of desire and hunger. "What are you doing, Roger?" I demanded, my voice tight with panic. He didn't answer. He just smiled, a slow, unsettling curve of his lips, and reached down, his fingers finding the delicate clasp at the back of my gown. He tugged, and the fabric slipped off my shoulder, exposing my skin to the cool air of the room. "No, Roger," I said, pushing against his chest with all my strength. "Stop." He ignored me, his lips now trailing down my neck, pressing a kiss to my collarbone. For a fleeting moment, I gave in. A confusing warmth spread through me, a purely physical reaction to the closeness of his body, the heat of his touch. It was a betrayal of my own feelings. Then his hands moved lower, tracing the curves of my body beneath the thin fabric, exploring with a possessiveness that made my skin crawl. I pushed harder, turning my head away from his insistent lips. Roger didn't even flinch. He seemed amused by my behavior, as if he was convinced of his right to do this. He reached down and began to unbutton his own shirt, his movements hurried, impatient. Panic surged through me like a jolt of lightning. "Get off me!" I cried, shoving at his chest with everything I had. My hands shook as I pushed him back, hard enough to break free. I scrambled off the bed, breath ragged, the hem of my dress twisted around my legs and the strap slipping off my shoulder. My heart was pounding, wild and loud, like it was trying to claw its way out of my chest. He sat up, watching me with a look that was both petulant and entitled.
Why are you making such a fuss, Clementine? We're going to be married. What's the big deal?
"The big deal, Roger," I said, my voice trembling but firm, "is that I want to be loved, to be understood, to be cared, not just taken." He scoffed.
Don't be so dramatic. I just want us to be closer before the wedding.
"Closer," I said, my voice rising. "Closer would be getting to know me, respecting my wishes, not this disgusting display."
Disgusting?
He echoed, his blue eyes flashing with anger.
You think this is disgusting? You should be grateful for my attention. A girl from your background.
He let the insult hang in the air, the unspoken words, poor, insignificant, echoing in the silence. That was it. Something inside me snapped. All the years of feeling less than, the constant struggle to make ends meet, the sting of unspoken judgments. It all coalesced into a white-hot fury. "How dare you?" I spat, my voice shaking. "My family has more honor in their little finger than you have in your entire spoiled body." His face contorted with rage.
Honor? You think marrying me is some kind of sacrifice? You should be on your knees thanking me.
The anger boiled over, a lifetime of feeling less than, of working tirelessly, rising to the surface. My hand shot out, and the sound of my palm connecting with his cheek echoed in the opulent room. His eyes widened in shock, then narrowed into slits of pure, unadulterated fury. "This engagement is over, Roger," I declared, my voice trembling but resolute. I fumbled with the heavy gold ring on my finger, the symbol of a future I now knew would be a living hell. I yanked it off and threw it at his chest. It hit him with a dull thud and fell to the plush carpet. His face twisted with fury.
You think you can just walk away from me?
He shouted, his words slurred and sharp, the stench of alcohol thick in the air. He stepped toward me too fast. I backed away, but before I could gather myself, he pressed me against the wall, his weight pressing me down. His hands clamped around my wrists, holding them above my head. My heart raced as panic pushed through the sting of pain.
You belong to me.
He spat, his voice low and trembling with rage. His head dipped lower to the crook of my neck. I froze for a split second. I need to get out. Now I twisted hard, kicking out with all the strength I had. My body moved on pure instinct, wild and desperate. One of my hands slipped free, and without thinking, I reached up and clawed at his face, fingernails digging in, fighting like my life depended on it. Because it did. He cried out, recoiling just enough. It was all I needed. I slipped out from under him, pushing myself toward the door with every ounce of strength I had. My gown tore at the hem, but I didn't stop. I ran for the door, flung it open, and bolted into the hallway, my bare feet slipping against the marble. Behind me, I heard him shouting, his voice echoing through the corridors.
Don't just stand there. Stop her. Bring her to me, now.
He barked at his men, but I was already running, not looking back. I just needed to be anywhere but there. The cold night air burned in my lungs as I ran, my bare feet slamming against the damp forest floor. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out the distant howls that grew closer, too close. I glanced over my shoulder. Roger's men were following, eyes locking onto me. One of them shifted into a monstrous wolf. Another followed, then another. I barely had time to think before my instincts took over. Pain tore through me, bones shifting, muscles burning, skin stretching. The scream that left my throat turned into a snarl as I landed on 4 paws instead of 2. My wolf form took over. A flash of white fur. My heartbeat steadying. Fangs bared. I lunged. I ripped into the nearest wolf, my teeth sinking into his shoulder. He yelped, but another crashed into me, sending me tumbling into the dirt. Claws tore through my side, teeth snapped at my neck. There were too many. I fought, but I could feel myself slowing. Then a monstrous snarl shook the ground. A massive black wolf crashed into them with terrifying force. The air was filled with yelps of pain, snarls of rage, the sound of flesh tearing, bones breaking. Anthony. I barely held on as I forced myself back into my human form. My body was weak, shaking. Anthony stood in front of me, panting, covered in scratches and blood. He had come for me. The last wolf ran. Anthony let him. Silence settled over the forest, except for the ragged sound of our breathing. I stared at him. My hands trembled as I pressed them to my wound, warmth seeping through my fingers. I should have been grateful. But all I felt was rage. My throat tightened. Tears welled in my eyes, but they weren't from pain. My hands balled into fists, my vision blurred with fury and heartbreak. I told you I couldn't stay with him, I screamed, slamming my fists against his chest. I told you, but you didn't listen. Anthony's chest rose and fell heavily, but he said nothing. He just stood there, silent. I hit him again, harder. Say something, Anthony. Nothing. He just stood there, his eyes locked into the ground, his hands clenched at his sides, his jaw tight, his face carved with regret. I hated it. I hated the way he looked at me like that, like he was breaking with me, like he wanted to hold me. I hated that no matter how much I hit him, how much I screamed at him, I wanted to hold him too. I raised my hand and slapped him. Hard. His face barely moved. The pain in my chest spread. Unbearable. Suffocating. I turned away. I took one step. Then another. Then, his hand wrapped around my wrist. I froze. His grip was firm, warm, familiar.
Clem, come with me.
He said. His voice was rough, low, pained. No, I snapped, trying to yank my hand free. He didn't argue, but his fingers tightened, just slightly. Not to hold me back, but to hold me together. And then, he pulled me into the darkness, and I let him. And now, I'm here, hiding in the storm-soaked ribs of the Appalachian Mountains, in the house of the man I should have loved all along, the only one who ever fought for me without asking for anything in return. My silent protector, the only one who ever looked at me like I was worth saving. I should have died that night, but I didn't, because he found me first. When the world started to come back, it didn't come all at once, just fragments. The smell of pine and smoke, the ache behind my eyes, a hand, calloused and steady, brushing hair from my face. Then darkness again, thick and clinging, like the aftermath of a nightmare. I woke up in someone else's bed, heart stuttering, mouth dry, skin slick with cold sweat. The blanket smelled like cedar and something distinctly masculine. I blinked hard, vision still fuzzy. Every inch of me throbbed. My ribs were bandaged tight, and there was a raw burn crawling across my shoulder. But it was the memory of Roger's snarl, the way his wolves had circled me like I was already dead, that made my hands shake. Then I heard the kettle whistle. Anthony. Safe. I let my eyes fall closed again. When I opened them a second time, he was standing beside me, crouched low, brows drawn tight. Those wolf-sharp eyes locked on mine like he'd been waiting for this moment.
You've been out for 3 days,
He said, voice low and rough.
I thought we lost you, Clem.
He looked different. Older, maybe. Sharper around the edges. There was a cut across his cheekbone, dried blood on the collar of his black thermal. And yet, somehow, he still smelled like rain and pine and the leather of his jacket, comfort and danger in equal parts. I tried to sit up, but my body screamed in protest. He moved instantly, steady hands on my shoulders.
Easy.
3 days. Why did you come for me? My voice cracked. He didn't even blink, just set the mug down on the nightstand and said,
Because I always will.
I lost it. The tears hit before I could stop them, hot and ugly and too much all at once. I didn't want to cry in front of him, but I couldn't hold it in. Everything shattered. My pride, my control, my carefully built walls. Anthony didn't flinch. He just leaned in, thumb swiping one of the tears off my cheek, with the same gentleness he used to pull me from the snow that night. No questions, no judgment.
Don't cry,
He said.
You're safe now. You need fluids.
He murmured.
Drink.
I took the mug with shaking hands. Mint and honey. I hadn't tasted that since I was 17, when my mama used to make it during long winters after the pack meetings when the nightmares got too loud. When I could finally speak again, I rasped. You didn't tell anyone, did you? Anthony sat back in the chair beside the bed. His face was unreadable, but I saw the flicker of tension in his jaw.
Not yet.
He said.
But I should tell Dad you're here.
Anthony said after a moment.
Simon's worried. Hell, everyone is. They've been...
No, I snapped. My voice came out too sharp, but I didn't care. You can't tell him. You can't tell anyone I'm here.
Clementine?
They'll send me back, I said, the words tumbling out too fast. They'll drag me back to Roger, and I swear to God, Anthony, I'll die before I let that bastard touch me again. Anthony's eyes darkened, his hands curled into fists on his thighs.
He doesn't deserve you,
He said quietly, voice rough.
He never did. And I hate that it's taken me this long to see it.
I looked away. I couldn't handle that look on his face, filled with guilt and anger. That night, we ate dinner in silence. I sat at the small wooden table in his cabin, wrapped in one of his flannel shirts, my plate untouched. He didn't push me to eat, just set the food in front of me and sat across the table, watching the fire crackle in the hearth like it held all the answers. The silence wasn't empty. It was thick with everything unsaid, with the memory of that night, his body shielding mine in the dark, his arms holding me like I was the most fragile thing in the world, like how he looked at me on my engagement day, when Roger claimed me in front of the pack, rage written all over his face. My eyes drifted to his hands, rough, calloused, strong. They were resting on his thighs, fingers twitching like he was holding himself back from reaching for me. Then, as if something suddenly clicked in his mind, he stood up without a word and walked toward the kitchen. The bowl clinked gently on the table as Anthony set it down beside me. Warm water, clean rags, a bottle of something that smelled sharp and medicinal. The fire still flickered behind us, low and steady, casting amber light across the worn wood floors of his cabin.
Let me tend your wounds.
He said quietly. I hesitated. My fingers clutched the hem of the flannel shirt he'd wrapped me in earlier. It wasn't just the pain, it was the closeness. The way his voice curled low and careful around me, like he was scared I might break again. But I nodded. He pulled the chair closer and sat in front of me, sleeves rolled past his forearms, eyes locked on mine with that fierce, unreadable look that always made it hard to breathe. I slid the fabric off my shoulder slowly. The air hit my skin, cool against the raw heat of the wound. Anthony leaned in, his breath shallow. He dipped the cloth into the water, wrung it out, and pressed it against my skin. I flinched.
Sorry.
He murmured. His voice cracked slightly.
I'll be gentle.
But his hands, they weren't steady. His touch was careful, deliberate, but there was tension in his fingers, a tremor that betrayed what he was holding back. Anger, guilt. Something else, too. Something quieter.
There's more.
He said, voice low.
I need to clean the rest.
I stood meeting his eyes, and for the first time, I wasn't scared to let someone see me. I pulled the fabric of my shirt down over my chest, letting it fall in folds at my waist, baring myself, not just to his hands, but to his eyes. My skin prickled under the cool air, but the warmth of his eyes made me forget the chill. He swallowed hard, eyes tracing over me, tracing every wound like he was memorizing them, grieving each one. He didn't look away, but he didn't devour me either. His gaze moved slowly, measured, reverent, not lustful, just quiet, like seeing me hurt was killing him. He reached for another rag, soaked it, wrung it out with shaking hands, and started to clean the cuts across my ribs, my side, the back of my arm. His touch was precise now, controlled, practiced, but not cold. Each press of the cloth burned hotter than the last. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until he said,
Turn around.
I hesitated, then turned. The silence behind me stretched. I felt it before I heard him move, the sudden sharp breath, the way the air in the room shifted. His fingers hovered near my skin but didn't touch, and when he finally spoke, his voice was a low growl, thick with something dark.
This bruise.
I turned just enough to glance over my shoulder. His brows were pulled together, jaw clenched hard. He was staring at the bruise on my collarbone, deep, purplish black, the reminder of Roger's rightful claim.
That mark.
He said again, quieter this time.
That wasn't from the wolves.
I swallowed. No, I whispered. That was Roger. He went still, dead still. The wolf in him surfaced just under the skin. I could feel it. Rage rising like heat off pavement. Not the kind that exploded. The kind that simmered, slow and deadly, coiled around his spine, waiting. He didn't speak, just reached for the cloth again and kept cleaning my wounds like his hands weren't shaking, like his breath wasn't ragged, like he wasn't 2 seconds from losing it. When he was done, he knelt there for a long moment, the rag dripping red into the bowl between us. I slowly turned back around and reached for the shirt, pulling it back over my arms. "Thank you," I whispered. He nodded once, not like it was nothing, like it wasn't enough. Later, he offered me the bed.
I'll take the floor.
He said, like it was obvious. "Anthony."
Don't argue with me. Just rest. You need it.
So I curled into his sheets, soft cotton, smelling faintly of pine and leather and him, and tried to shut my eyes. But I couldn't sleep. Not really, because I could still feel him across the room, could hear the creak of the floorboards as he shifted, could taste the things we hadn't said on the back of my tongue. I lay there for what felt like hours, staring at the wooden beams of the ceiling, listening to the soft crackle of the fire. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us moved, but neither of us really slept either. I woke up to the sound of rain tapping soft against the tin roof, like a nervous hand drumming fingers on a wooden table. For a second, I didn't remember where I was. Just the clean scent of cedar smoke, the weight of a heavy quilt tangled around my legs. The world outside Anthony's house was still gray, quiet. Inside, he was already moving. I heard the slow creak of the kitchen floorboards, the kettle whistling, the scrape of a chair being pushed in. He was trying not to wake me, but I could feel him, his presence steady and anchoring, like the low hum of something always running beneath the surface. I slipped the quilt off and patted down the room, Anthony's sweatshirt swallowing my frame. I caught sight of him leaning against the kitchen counter. He stood there in a black suit that looked like it was made just for him. Broad shoulders, crisp lines, damp hair still clinging to his forehead from a quick shower. He looked calm, but I could feel the tension simmering underneath. The kind of calm that came right before a storm. His gaze flicked up the moment he sensed me.
You should be resting.
"I'm tired of resting," I said softly. His lips twitched like he wanted to argue but didn't. Instead, he nodded toward the table.
Tea's hot. Sit.
I did. Fingers wrapped around the mug, steam brushing my cheeks. I stared out the fogged window. Something was coming. Anthony dropped into the seat across from me, elbows resting on his thighs, forearms flexed, and tension carved into every line of his body.
I have to go to the fortress,
he said.
Dad's called a meeting. Pack business.
Panic flared in my chest. "You can't. What if Roger's there?"
He will be, which is why I have to act normal. If I don't show, it'll raise flags.
I shook my head. He reached across the table and wrapped his hand around mine. Warm, steady, real.
I'll be back by evening, Clem. I promise.
I held onto his hand like a lifeline. "Anthony."
Don't worry, Clementine. I've got you.
He left with a long look over his shoulder, and for a while I sat in that kitchen like the walls were caving in. It wasn't even noon when the knock came. Sharp, frantic, the sound of something wrong. Will, one of Anthony's friends I'd met at his birthday, barreled through the door, rain still clinging to his jacket.
Roger's men.
He said.
They're sniffing around. Some are headed this way.
I barely had time to grab a coat before we were in Will's truck, tires kicking up gravel, the road twisting through the trees like a path through hell.
Anthony said if anything happened, I was to get you out. We're going to Jessica's.
Jessica's cottage sat tucked against a mossy ridge. Ivy crawled up the stone chimney, and wind chimes whispered in the breeze like secrets you weren't meant to hear. She opened the door before we knocked, wearing leggings and an oversized hoodie, her long braid falling over one shoulder. She'd been kind to me at Anthony's birthday. I remembered her warm smile, her blunt jokes, the way she'd winked when Anthony wanted to cut the cake with me.
Clementine,
She said, pulling me into a hug.
come in.
Her place smelled like eucalyptus and cinnamon, cozy and worn in like she'd been living there forever. I sank onto the couch while she made tea, fussed over my bruises, and wrapped me in a thick blanket like it could protect me from more than just cold.
You remember me from Anthony's birthday, right?
She asked gently.
We danced like idiots to Fleetwood Mac?
I smiled weakly. Yes, I do.
Well, I am from Silver Moon Pack, daughter of Beta and Will's fiancé.
Anthony called twice, once to check if I'd eaten anything, once to say he was building a safe house, small, off-grid, deep in the woods.
You'll be hidden.
He said.
I'll come for you by nightfall.
But it wasn't the words that broke me. It was the sound of him. Tired, fierce, worried. I could hear how much he hated being away, how much he wanted to come back. And even though he didn't say it, I felt the weight of everything he didn't say pressing into my chest. By dusk, the sky was bleeding orange through the trees. I sat on Jessica's porch swing wrapped in her biggest sweater, watching the wind stir the fog. Then I heard the hum of the car. Anthony. He stepped out of the driver's side, boots crunching gravel, coat still soaked from the rain. Will was beside him, scanning the trees, already on edge. Jessica opened the door.
She's staying with me.
She said, arms crossed.
No.
Anthony said firmly.
Roger won't think to check. He knows about you and Will.
Anthony snapped, then softened his tone.
If he finds you, he finds her.
Jessica looked at me. Jessica, I said, if he hurts you because of me? She pulled me into a hard hug.
Then break his damn nose next time, yeah?
I gave her a small smile. Deal. The ride back was silent. Anthony drove like he had something to prove, knuckles white around the wheel, eyes flicking to the rear view like he expected headlights to come barreling after us. The new cottage sat deeper in the woods, one bedroom, wood stove, no one around for miles. And when he opened the door and let me inside, something in my chest cracked wide open. This place is... I turned in a slow circle, voice catching. You did this for me? His eyes softened. I'm sorry, I whispered, for dragging you into this. He didn't flinch, just stepped forward, his eyes searching mine.
You think I wouldn't burn this whole mountain down for you?
I blinked fast. You shouldn't have to.
But I want to, because it's my fault. Every bit of pain, every scar, every wound. It's all on me.
Silence stretched between us, heavy and unforgiving. I wanted to reach out. Every bone in my body ached to be held, to be seen. But I didn't push. The storm hadn't let up. Not once. The kind that rattled the windows and curled up in your bones. Wild, moaning wind and sharp rain that felt like it was trying to peel the skin off the mountain. Thunder rolled so close it shook the cottage walls. Water had started dripping inside, slicking the wooden floor in one steady rhythm, right near where Anthony had tried to make a bed with 2 scratchy blankets and a coat he folded like a pillow. But even he had to admit defeat when the water kept splashing his arm every 10 minutes. Just get in the damn bed, I muttered into the dark. He hesitated at first. Typical Anthony, hesitant when it came to anything that might make him feel good, like comfort or warmth or me. But finally, the mattress dipped behind me. I scooted as far to the wall as I could go, hugging my knees to my chest. The blanket did next to nothing to fight the chill. My toes were like ice, my skin clammy with cold, my thoughts loud and messy. We lay there like strangers, backs turned, silence louder than the thunder outside. And still, all I could feel was him. His body heat, the slight shift of his weight with every breath. The restraint, God, the restraint, pouring off him like he was hanging on by a thread. Like one wrong move would break him in half. I hated it. I hated how much he still tried to hold himself back, as if wanting me, needing me, was some kind of crime. My body ached, not just with the heat pressing at the edges of my skin, but with something deeper, emptier, something that had nothing to do with the bond and everything to do with the fact that this was the one place in the world I felt safe. And even that safety came with conditions. I shifted, just a little. My back found his chest, the slow rise and fall of it, the warm line of his arm barely touching mine. He tensed. I didn't speak. I just stayed there, needing this, needing him. After a moment, his arm slid around my waist. Not tightly, not possessively, just gently. Like he wasn't sure if I'd let him keep it there. His breath brushed the back of my neck, slow, controlled, careful. And I broke. I turned. His eyes were already open, watching me through the dark like he'd been doing it all night. Anthony, I whispered. His throat moved as he swallowed.
You should sleep.
I can't. Silence again. But this one was different. It pulsed. Slowly, I reached up, brushing my fingers over his jaw. His stubble scraped my skin. His eyes locked on mine, like he was torn between everything he wanted and everything he thought he shouldn't have. And then, I couldn't wait anymore. I kissed him. Fierce. Desperate. Like my whole soul was clawing its way out of my body just to touch his. He froze for half a heartbeat, and then he shattered. His hand gripped my waist, pulling me flush against him. His mouth slanted over mine, deepening the kiss until I forgot my name, forgot the storm, forgot everything but him. He tasted like regret and longing, and something wild that had been caged too long. I gasped into him, and he groaned, pressing his forehead to mine, and then he pulled back. Abrupt, jarring, like he'd been punched in the gut. I blinked, stunned, chest heaving. What's wrong? He sat up, running a hand down his face. His voice came out hoarse.
I can't, Clementine.
My blood turned cold. Why? Don't you love me? He looked at me then, eyes stormy, jaw clenched, every inch of him coiled tight.
I love you, I do.
The words should have made me warm, but they didn't. They made me furious. Then what the hell is the problem? I demanded. He stood, pacing the edge of the bed, fists curled at his sides.
Dad trusted me, Clem. I can't break that. And you were supposed to marry Roger, not me.
Do you even hear yourself? My voice cracked. You're still trying to be the perfect son, the obedient beta, the sacrifice. He looked at me, pain splintering across his face. I was forced to Roger. You knew what he was. You knew what he did to me. And still, you stood back and let it happen. Because Dad said it was what's best for the pack? He didn't answer. Do you know what it felt like? My voice shook. Knowing the only person I've ever loved let me walk into hell with my eyes wide open?
Clementine.
No, I came to you broken and bleeding. I chose you. And now, you still can't give me all of you? His silence spoke louder than anything he could have said. I laughed bitterly, wiping at my face. Fine, if that's what it takes. If you need me gone so you can live with your precious sense of duty, then I'll go.
Don't.
I'll go back to Blood Moon. I'll marry Roger. I'll become exactly what your father wants. That'll make everyone happy, right? I stood up from the bed, reaching for the door.
Don't say that.
He growled, eyes flashing. Anthony stepped closer, gripping my arms. Not rough, just desperate. My breath hitched. He stood there, breathing hard, torn open and trembling. He cupped my face like I was breakable, like I was holy. The pads of his thumbs brushed just under my eyes, catching tears I didn't know I'd let fall. His forehead leaned into mine, and he let out a breath so shaky it stirred the strands of hair falling into my face.
You've always been my choice.
He whispered.
I just didn't know if I deserved you.
I stared into his eyes. Those familiar, stormy blues that had haunted my dreams, steadied me when no one else had, and let the ache in my chest spill out. You don't, I whispered, my voice low and trembling. But I didn't pull away. I couldn't. You really don't. He flinched at my words. And then it happened. That last fragile thread of control snapped. His mouth was on mine the next second, crushing, claiming, crashing into me with years of buried need. It wasn't like a fairy tale, not like a dream. It was like a man starving. Like a man who'd waited too long, burned too hot, held back too much. His hands found my waist, pulling me into his lap as he guided us to the edge of the bed, our breaths uneven, our bodies tangled. I felt the soft brush of his stubble, the heat radiating off his chest, the way his fingertips trembled as they gripped my hips. His thumb swept across my cheekbone as he reached for a cloth resting on the nightstand. His eyes didn't leave mine. "What's this?" I asked, heart pounding as I stared at the soft fabric in his hand.
I want you to feel every bit of me.
He murmured.
No distractions. Just you and me.
I laughed, nerves fluttering through my chest. I never thought you were this creative.
I've had a long time to imagine this.
He said, tying the cloth gently over my eyes.
I want every version of you. Every way I can have you.
The world went dark, but everything else came alive. His fingertips skimmed along my jaw, his breath warm against my shoulder. He kissed the slope where my neck met my collarbone, slow and reverent, then lower, tracing the edges of my shirt with his mouth. I shivered, body humming like a live wire. His hands were calloused but gentle, unbuttoning me one piece at a time like I was something to be unwrapped and worshipped. When the fabric slipped from my skin, I could feel his gaze tracing every inch of me, even in the dark. It made me shy. It made me bold. My heart beat loud in my chest like it knew we'd crossed a line we couldn't come back from.
You are beautiful, beautiful than I imagined.
He whispered against my collarbone, tasting every inch of my skin, mouth dragging slow, lingering kisses down my chest, across the soft dip of my stomach. I gasped, whispering his name. Anthony.
I've dreamed of this.
He said, voice shaking with need.
But nothing compares to this.
I could feel his need in the way his hands trembled, in the way his chest rose and fell against mine like he couldn't catch his breath either. Slowly, he guided my hands to his shirt. I tugged at his shirt, my fingers clumsy, tugging it up over his head. He caught my wrists mid-motion, steadying me.
I'm all yours, Clem.
He said.
You don't have to be afraid.
My heart swelled and clenched all at once. I kissed him again, slower this time. My lips brushed along his jaw, then down his neck. He groaned softly, his hands finding the small of my back as my lips moved over the hard lines of his chest, trembling each inch of muscle, each scar, each part of him that was no longer just a fantasy. Slowly, I sank to my knees. My hands shook as I reached for his belt, fumbling with the buckle. His fingers threaded through my hair, holding on like he needed the anchor. He groaned, head tipping back, breath catching, completely undone by the moment.
Come with me.
He said, lifting me into his arms. He guided me gently onto the bed, turning me onto my sides. He then curled around me from behind. My back pressed to his chest, and his arms circled my waist, hand settling right under my ribs like he was holding something fragile. My breath caught when his fingers slid up, grazing the soft curve of my chest, his arms circling my waist, anchoring me.
Are you comfortable, Clem?
He asked, voice low against the shell of my ear. I nodded, lips parting on a silent gasp as he molded himself to me. His hips pressed into mine, just enough to let me feel him there, thick, aching, and desperate, but still holding back. My legs tangled with his, knees falling open in invitation. He moved against me, slow at first, agonizingly slow, like he didn't want the moment to end. His arm tightened around my stomach as he rocked into me, inch by inch, our bodies finally becoming one. It wasn't just about the bond. It wasn't about claiming or needing or destiny. It was about us. Years of longing all poured into the quiet rhythm of our bodies, the slow grind of hips, the shuddering breaths, the heat that built, burned, and bloomed between us. His name spilled from my lips again and again, like a prayer I'd carried inside me since I fell for him. He whispered mine too, over and over, like it was the only word he'd ever need again.
As we neared the edge, his pace quickened. His movements became more frantic, more desperate, more sacred. I moved with him, gasping against his skin, grounding myself in the curve of his neck. The way his hands trembled gave him away.
When it was over, he rolled us gently, bringing me onto his chest. My blindfold slipped loose and fell beside us. I blinked into the warm light of the fire and found him staring at me like I was the only thing that had ever mattered.
I love you, Clem.
He whispered, cupping my jaw.
Every breath, every second. It's always been you.
I kissed his palm and leaned into his hand. I love you too. He pulled me close, wrapping the quilt around us both. The rain outside slowed to a soft patter, almost like the mountain itself had quieted just for us. It was the sound of footsteps that yanked me from sleep. Hundreds of them, thunderous, merciless. My heart jerked awake before the rest of me caught up. Anthony's hand clamped over my mouth before I could ask. His eyes were wide in the darkness, already full of the storm.
They found us,
he whispered. I blinked into the dark, disoriented, the blankets tangled around my legs like seaweed. My bones ached, my mind foggy with sleep, but I heard it too now. Men, shifters, close. A storm of them rolling through the trees like a wave crashing toward us. I was already out of the bed, barefoot, tugging on my jeans and Anthony's old hoodie I'd slept in. The cabin Anthony built just yesterday was already trembling under the sound of approaching wolves. Anthony grabbed my wrist and pulled me toward the back.
There's a creek just behind the hill. We follow it west. Stay low.
I looked out the broken window. Shadows moved between trees. Fast. Too many.
Shift,
he said. His voice wasn't loud, just steady.
Now.
My pulse spiked, but I nodded, my skin already tingling with the burn of the shift. Bones stretched, fur split through flesh, and everything inside me twisted until I wasn't a woman anymore. I was fury on 4 legs. Anthony shifted too, his wolf a towering streak of gray, broad-shouldered and powerful. He looked back once before leaping through the creek, splinters flying. I followed. The forest swallowed us whole. Branches whipped past, mud and pine needles slid under my paws. Anthony ran ahead, cutting a path, growling low, tail rigid. I heard them behind us, Roger's wolves, snarling, fast, closing in. We burst into a clearing, moonlight catching on snow-flecked leaves, breath steaming from our mouths. That's when Anthony stopped, turned. I knew that look. He wasn't going to keep running. He launched himself into the oncoming pack without a sound, a blur of muscle and rage. The first wolf didn't even see him coming. Anthony slammed him into a tree so hard the bark cracked. The next lunged and he twisted midair, biting down hard. I froze. For just a second. And then, a gunshot cracked the night. I heard it hit. Flesh. Not bark. Anthony yelped. I turned, snarled, and lunged. My wolf collided with one of the men, my teeth sinking into his forearm. He screamed. I didn't let go until his blood stained the snow, and the others hesitated. Anthony's wolf was limping now. I moved faster, dragging him with me until we found shelter. The abandoned cabin was tucked between two old birch trees. It looked like it had been forgotten for decades. Roof half caved in, door hanging on one hinge, but it was shelter.
I shifted back first, body bare, steaming in the cold night air. I caught Anthony before he collapsed, his blood warm against my palms. He was shaking, his skin pale, sweat beading at his temple. "Lie down," I whispered, pulling him inside. He didn't argue, just clutched my hand like a lifeline. I found an old blanket, dusty but dry, and covered us both. The wind howled outside, but the cabin walls held, barely. Anthony reached for me. His hand was slick with blood, trembling.
You protected me,
He said, voice hoarse. His eyes were shutting now. Panic surged through me as I pressed both palms against Anthony's chest, trying to keep him from slipping any further. My hands were slick with his blood, too warm, too much. I couldn't stop shaking, not from fear. No, that left me hours ago, but from the sheer weight of holding him together. His body was soaked through, sticking to his skin in dark, heavy patches, and the wound in his shoulder pulsed with every beat of his heart. A ragged breath tore out of him as he gritted his teeth. "Stay with me," I whispered, brushing his sweat-soaked hair off his forehead. "Please, just keep your eyes open." He chuckled, but it sounded like gravel in his throat.
You, bossy as ever.
"You're bleeding through your damn soul, Anthony. You don't get to joke right now." My wolf was still beneath my skin, growling low, but I held her back. She wanted to rip the world apart for him, but all I could do right now was keep pressure on the wound and pray my voice could anchor him. I fumbled for my phone with bloody fingers, cursing under my breath as I tried to unlock it. Jessica, she'd know what to do. She had to. When her voice answered, I nearly sobbed. "Jess, it's me. Anthony's been shot. He's not doing good."
Where are you?
"In the woods, somewhere west of Craggy Gardens. Old cabin. Near the fire tower, I think,"
We're coming.
she said without hesitation.
Hold on.
The call ended, but the quiet didn't feel peaceful. It felt cruel. Anthony's head lolled toward me, his lashes sticky with sweat.
You're safe, right?
I swallowed hard. "Don't worry about me. I'm not the one leaking like a busted pipe,"
Still, had to be sure.
he mumbled, eyes flickering shut. I grabbed his face. No, don't you dare close your eyes." He smiled faintly.
You're beautiful, even with blood on your cheeks.
"Anthony, shut up." But my heart cracked open wide. I remembered this one time, when I wore something uncomfortable, one of those outfits Roger picked out. He just tossed his jacket over my shoulders, smiled, and said,
There, now you won't be uncomfortable.
that was the kind of man he was. Always taking the hit, always putting himself last. And now here he was, bleeding out on the floor of a rotting cabin because of me. My hands trembled as I looked down at his chest, torn flesh and blood. The bullet was still lodged in his shoulder. I didn't know how deep. I'd seen enough wounds in this pack war to know the difference between a graze and something deadly. "I'm gonna get it out," I said, though I didn't fully know how. He flinched as I touched the edge of the wound, but didn't cry out. His jaw clenched so tight I thought he might crack a tooth. I tore a strip from my torn shirt and soaked it in the last of our clean water, then folded it and pressed it around the bullet. My fingers slipped more than once. He groaned but didn't stop me. "I got you," I whispered, "just a little longer." The sun had barely started to rise when headlights cut through the trees outside. I could have cried from relief. Jessica burst through the door, Will right behind her.
Oh, God.
She gasped, dropping beside me.
You weren't kidding.
Nope, I choked out. Will helped me lift Anthony as gently as we could. Jessica packed gauze into the wound like she'd done it 100 times.
We need to get him to the hospital,
she said.
No,
Anthony muttered, barely conscious now.
they can't know she's with me. They'll come for her.
I grabbed his hand, fingers laced tight. Anthony, we're way past playing it safe. You're going, and that's final. His eyes met mine, glassy and dim.
If they find you,
Then they'll have to go through me, I said, voice shaking. And they'll learn real quick that I'm not just some Omega's daughter anymore. We drove fast, Will at the wheel, tires biting into gravel. I sat in the back with Anthony's head in my lap. Every bump made him flinch. I kept running my fingers through his hair, whispering nonsense, stories, memories, anything to keep him tethered. By the time we pulled into the hospital lot, the sun had painted the horizon in bruised gold and dusty pink. I kissed his forehead before they wheeled him inside. I'll be right here, I said, and I meant it. I didn't realize how cold I was until I was sitting in the waiting room, arms wrapped around myself, blood drying on my skin. The fluorescent lights were too bright. Everything smelled like antiseptic and coffee. My phone rang in my pocket. Dad! I stared at it. He'd called 6 times in the last 2 days. I hadn't answered once, but something in my gut twisted this time, and I picked up.
Clementine,
His voice was raw. I stayed quiet.
where are you?
He asked, softer now. I didn't answer.
I don't know what you think you're doing, but Roger, he's not going to let this go. He said if you don't come back, he's taking Jack.
The room tilted slightly. What?
He came to the house, said you've humiliated him, that you've ruined something sacred. He said Jack's old enough to work for him. If you don't return, he'll take him as leverage.
My whole body went cold. I stood up slowly, phone still pressed to my ear. If he touches my brother, I will end him, Dad. You hear me?
Clem,
But I'd already hung up. I stared through the glass doors, where somewhere behind white walls, Anthony was fighting for his life. And now Jack was in danger too. The weight of everything crashed down on me then, like a damn tidal wave. And I had no idea how I was supposed to survive it. But I would, because I had to, for Anthony, for Jack, for the girl I used to be, and the woman I was becoming. I sank into the chair, curled into myself, and whispered to no one. Just hold on. I'm not done fighting. I couldn't sit still. My knees bounced restlessly, palms slick with sweat. Every second that passed felt like it stole something from me. The image of Anthony, half-conscious, blood soaking through his shirt, eyes unfocused, kept flashing behind my eyes like some cruel slideshow I couldn't pause. Then the door creaked open.
Family of Anthony Moonvail?
The doctor asked. I shot to my feet so fast the chair behind me clattered against the wall. Yes, I'm his... The doctor offered a small smile, the kind that said, he made it, but don't get too comfortable.
He's stable. The bullet missed anything major. He lost a lot of blood and needs time to recover, but he's out of danger. We'll keep him for at least a week to monitor the wound and keep infection down.
My knees nearly gave out. Jessica grabbed my elbow, steadying me, but I didn't look at her. I was already halfway down the hall before the doctor finished talking. I found him in a private room at the end of the corridor. Pale sheets, monitors humming. The white walls made his skin look grayer than it was. His arm was wrapped tight in fresh gauze, resting beside him. But when he turned his head and saw me, barely lifting his lids, a crooked smile tugged at his lips.
Hey.
He rasped. Tears stung the backs of my eyes. I crossed the room in 2 strides, crouched by the bed, and brushed his damp hair back from his forehead. You scared the hell out of me,
Wasn't planning on dying.
he murmured, trying to grin, but it faded quick when he saw my expression.
I'm okay, Clem.
I pressed my forehead against his, breathing in his scent, still him, even under the antiseptic and sweat, but there was a weight pressing down on my chest. I hadn't told him yet. I have to go, I whispered. His eyes opened wider.
What?
Just for a few days. I need to see Jack and Matilda. My dad's been calling nonstop. I lied. He frowned, but didn't say anything for a second. Just searched my face like he was memorizing it. Then he nodded slowly, wincing with the effort.
I don't like it,
He said quietly.
but I get it.
I kissed him, soft and slow, tasting regret and something heavier on his lips. I'll come back, I whispered against his mouth. I swear. The Ironclaw pack hadn't changed much. Same pine-lined border, same worn gravel roads, same thick silence pressing in like fog. The air smelled of moss and damp earth, the mountains watching like ghosts. When I stepped through the gate, heads turned. Conversations stopped. The weight of 100 stares fell on me like stones. But then, 2 voices cut through it.
Clem.
Jack's voice cracked as he ran toward me, lanky and all grown out since I last saw him. Matilda wasn't far behind, her wild curls bouncing as she clutched her stuffed rabbit tight. I dropped to my knees and caught them both, pulling them close like I could somehow shield them from all of this. Past, future, fear, judgment. Jack trembled in my arms. Matilda sniffled into my neck.
You came back.
Jack said, voice shaking. I always will. I held them until my legs ached and my heart felt just a little less broken. But the peace didn't last. Henry stood by the porch, arms crossed, his face thundercloud dark. He didn't say a word until the kids went inside. Then he barked.
You got a hell of a nerve showing up.
I flinched. I had no choice, Dad.
You left. You abandoned us in the middle of a damn alliance with Blood Moon. You ran with him.
I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Everyone knew I'd been with Anthony. I left because Roger tried to force himself on me. He hurt me. You bet I ran. His face faltered.
Why didn't you tell me before?
Would you have believed me? I whispered. Silence. His jaw clenched, and something in his eyes broke. Maybe it was anger, maybe guilt, maybe the sick understanding that he'd looked the other way too long.
I believe you now,
he said quietly.
What do we do?
I swallowed hard. I'm going back. His head jerked.
Like hell you are.
I have to, for Jack. He didn't argue again, just looked at me like I was a ghost walking barefoot into fire.
Don't do anything stupid,
he said gruffly. I already did, I said, backing away. But this time, I'm doing it with my eyes wide open. The air outside was cool and thick, like it knew something was wrong. Like it wanted to wrap itself around me and stop me from walking down the porch steps. My boots hit the gravel one slow step at a time. The sun hadn't even cracked the horizon yet, but the faint gray light of dawn bled through the trees. I could hear Jack's uneven breathing behind me, feel Matilda's tiny fingers wrapped tight around mine.
Do you really have to go?
Jack asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. His eyes were red-rimmed, like he hadn't slept a wink. I didn't have the heart to lie. Yeah, I do, baby. I smoothed his wild curls with a shaky hand. But just for a little while, okay? Just long enough to keep him off your back.
I can fight,
he said too fast.
I'll learn.
No. I turned to him, cupping his cheek, feeling the soft roundness of his still boy face. You shouldn't have to fight for me. That's not your job. Matilda squeezed my fingers tighter.
I don't like Roger.
That broke me. I smiled through a tear that slid down without permission. I don't like him either. Her bottom lip stuck out.
Then why are you leaving with him?
That question stayed in the air, thick and heavy as molasses, and I didn't know how to answer it without falling apart. So I just knelt and kissed her forehead, whispered, because sometimes grown-ups make choices they don't want to, for the people they love. Dad stood by the porch, arms crossed, his face torn up in a storm of rage and helplessness. I met his eyes and saw a flash of the man who once carried me on his shoulders through these same woods, whistling songs from old country radio.
I still think this is a mistake,
he said. I know, I nodded. But I need him to believe I'm broken enough to come back. The sound of tires crunching over loose gravel snapped my head up. I didn't need to see the car to know it was him. That purring engine didn't belong to anyone but Roger. The slick black Mercedes rolled to a stop like it owned the damn earth under its wheels. Roger stepped out, crisp as ever, black coat, shirt open at the collar, not a speck of dirt on his shoes despite the muddy path. His smug grin carved itself into the morning light like a bad omen.
There she is,
He said, arms out like this was some sweet reunion.
You made me chase you all across this state, Clementine. But look, here we are. I always knew you'd come home to me.
I swallowed hard. My tongue felt like sandpaper. You didn't find me, Roger. I came to you. His smile twitched.
Of course you did. You're smart enough to know who you belong to.
I didn't say anything, just turned and hugged Matilda one more time, whispered something soft only she'd hear. Then I held Jack like I wouldn't get another chance, because maybe I wouldn't. Roger leaned against the car with the door open.
Let's not drag this out, sweetheart. I got places to be.
I turned back once, just once, to look at my family, the only real thing I had left. Henry gave me a nod, not of approval, but of understanding. He couldn't stop me, but he could witness it. I slid into the passenger seat beside Roger, the leather cold under my legs. My hands fidgeted with the hem of my coat, trying not to shake. He didn't say a word for the first few miles. Just drove with that stupid, satisfied smirk on his face, like he'd won some kind of prize. His fingers drummed against the wheel to the beat of a song only he could hear.
You really thought you could run off with that mutt?
He asked finally.
Anthony, that beta who had no charm, no power of his own, one who lives on the crumbs of others.
I glared at him, biting the inside of my cheek. My pulse ticked fast in my throat.
You still love him?
Roger asked, voice slick as oil. I didn't answer. What was the point? He laughed, low and bitter.
You know, Dad's been wondering where you went. I haven't told him yet. But I could. Just one call. You disobey me again, and that mutt of yours? He'll wish he died in that cabin.
I turned to him slowly, met his eyes dead on. And what if I don't disobey? What if I play the role you want? Would that make you happy? Roger leaned in, too close.
It would make you safe. And Jack, too.
That was the knife in my chest, right there, the reminder. I looked away, pressed my forehead to the cool window glass, and watched the trees blur past like ghosts. Inside, I was burning up, torn in two. Anthony's voice echoed in my head. I won't let anyone hurt you again, Clementine. But I was going back into the fire, for Jack. And somehow, I'd have to survive it. The iron gates creaked open with a heaviness that matched the pit in my stomach. Roger's hand was pressed firm to my lower back, guiding me through the stone archway like I was his prize, his possession. The Blood Moon Fortress looked like something out of a twisted fairy tale. High towers kissed the low clouds, ivy crawling like greedy fingers across every surface. Inside, it smelled like polished wood, old secrets, and a hint of something darker beneath the surface. I wore a beautiful sky blue gown, stitched to make me look like a Luna, polished and perfect. But underneath it all, I still felt like a broken beta's mate, like no amount of silk could hide the cracks. The chill from the car ride hadn't left my skin. I pulled my cardigan tighter around me, trying to hide the trembling that never seemed to stop anymore. Roger walked like he owned the damn world, his fingers grazing the edge of my hip in a way that made my skin crawl. And then, warmth. Lady Eleanor stood at the base of the grand staircase, her silver hair twisted up into a crown braid, eyes sharp but strangely soft. She smiled as if we were long-lost friends.
Clementine, welcome home.
Isabella flanked her side, chin tilted, her smile more reserved but not cruel. Not what I expected from the girl who once laughed at me for being an Omega. Something was off. Simon stood near the fireplace, arms crossed, but not angry, just tired.
You should have told me you wanted to visit your family,
he said, voice light, like we were catching up over coffee. He had no idea I ran. Relief washed over me, Simon didn't know. I gave a stiff nod, my heart pounding. It was sudden. He didn't question it, didn't press. And I hated how relieved I felt, even knowing this whole place was a damn lion's den. Roger leaned close, whispering in my ear.
Dad don't know, and he won't, unless you give me a reason.
His breath was hot. It smelled like whiskey and something rotten underneath. I didn't answer. I just kept walking. Up the spiral staircase to my room. It was bigger than the cottage Anthony built with his bare hands, but it felt empty. The bed was too clean, too stiff. The curtains were red velvet, drawn open to show the full moon high above the mountains. I kept staring at it, arms folded across my chest, wishing I could rip myself out of the skin and run. But I didn't shift. I stayed human, because humans bleed quieter. Later that night, the door clicked open. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. I could feel him before he spoke. Roger's presence was heavy. He closed the door behind him like he had all the time in the world.
I missed you,
he said, voice syrup slick but laced with steel.
You look beautiful in my house.
I didn't respond. My arms stayed crossed. He came closer, the scent of his cologne clawing at my nose. His fingers brushed a curl off my cheek, then cupped my face. I flinched, cupped my face. And he kissed me, hard, mouth greedy, no warmth, just power. I gasped, pushing him back with both hands. My heart thundered in my ears. Roger wiped his lips, jaw twitching.
Don't disobey me,
he muttered, grabbing my wrist and pulling me down to the edge of the bed.
You know what I'm capable of.
I sat, legs stiff, hands clenching the bed sheets. His hand slid down to my thigh, slow, possessive, like he was carving his name into my skin. Every instinct screamed at me to tear his throat out. My wolf was clawing just beneath the surface. But I stayed quiet. Because Jack. Because Anthony. Because too many lives would fall apart if I made a single wrong move. Roger leaned in close.
Tomorrow,
he said.
You'll wear the Luna's mark. I'll parade you through the courtyard, let the whole pack see who you belong to.
He chuckled low, cruel.
And after the ceremony, after I take my alpha oath, we'll be married in 3 days.
3 days. He was rushing it, not because he loved me, but because he feared something. Anthony. He was scared of Anthony. That thought gave me the first flicker of hope I'd felt since stepping foot inside this place. When Roger finally left, I locked the door, backed up until I hit the wall, and slid down to the floor. My hands were shaking. I stared at them, at the dried blood still crusted under my nails from the night in the woods. I missed Anthony's scent, pine and smoke and warmth. I missed the way he always looked at me like I was something to be cherished, not conquered. I missed safety. I curled into the corner of that room, knees to my chest, and whispered his name like a prayer. Please hold on. Please come for me. My phone buzzed in my palm. Jessica. I took a shaky breath and answered. Hey.
Where are you, Clementine?
Her voice cracked. She sounded tired and worried. The kind of worry only real friends carry around like a second skin. I didn't respond. She didn't wait.
He's asking about you. All the damn time.
My heart clenched so hard it felt like my ribs might cave. How is he? I whispered, even though I already knew the answer wouldn't be easy. Jessica sighed.
He's healing, but not resting. Yesterday, he ripped out his IV and tore the oxygen line. Tried to get out of bed and leave the hospital. Said he needed to find you. Took 3 nurses and Will to calm him down.
My stomach twisted. My knees buckled slightly, and I leaned against the balcony railing for support.
He thinks you're coming back,
she added.
He keeps asking if you're done visiting your family. Keeps looking at the door like he expects you to walk in.
I pressed a fist to my chest, trying to push the ache back down.
Clem?
She asked, softer now.
Tell me, when are you coming back?
I looked outside the window at the dark sky, at the stars blinking like they had secrets they couldn't keep. I wanted to run to Anthony, fall into his arms, feel his heart beat under my hands, hear his voice rasp my name with that cracked, broken affection that always made me feel like the only girl in the world. But I couldn't. Not now. I can, I said quietly.
What do you mean, you can't?
She snapped.
What the hell's going on?
I hesitated, then sat down on the stone bench, wrapping my arms around myself. Roger threatened to take Jack. Said if I didn't come back with him, he'd make Jack his prisoner. And worse, he said if I disobey him, he'll tell Simon the truth.
The truth?
Jessica whispered. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. That Anthony hid me, took care of me, protected me. Roger'll twist it, make it sound like Anthony betrayed his dad. Jessica was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled.
You're sacrificing yourself again?
No, I lied. I'm protecting the people I love.
That's what you always say.
I swallowed hard, tracing the edge of my phone with my thumb. Promise me something?
I don't like this.
She muttered.
But yeah. What?
Don't tell Anthony.
What?
Please, Jess, I'm asking you. Don't tell him what Roger said. Don't tell him why I'm staying. He's barely holding it together. If he knew...
He'd come tearing through hell to get to you.
Exactly. I closed my eyes and whispered. I couldn't live with myself if anything happened to him because of me. Jessica let out a frustrated sound, but she didn't argue.
You don't belong there, Clem. You know that.
I know, I said. But right now, I don't have a choice. A beat of silence, then she exhaled softly.
All right. I won't tell him.
Thank you.
But Clementine?
She added, voice hardening.
Don't stay there too long. Promise me you'll find your way back.
I didn't promise. I couldn't. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time. The cold stone seeped through the fabric of my leggings, grounding me in the present, even as my heart drifted somewhere else. Back to the cabin, back to Anthony, back to the way his fingers brushed mine when he handed me water, like the smallest contact between us still meant everything. Back to the way his eyes never looked away, even when I was bloody and furious and full of doubt. He saw me, all of me, and I'd left him anyway. I heard footsteps, Roger's, heavy and confident, like the world was already his and I was just part of the spoils. I stood, straightened my spine, and wiped at the tears I hadn't realized had fallen. I couldn't let him see them. The door creaked open.
Clementine?
He said, voice too smooth, too smug. I didn't move. He stepped closer, wrapping an arm around my waist. I stiffened instantly, my stomach flipping with disgust. His hand slid a little too low, and I resisted the urge to elbow him in the ribs.
You should get some sleep,
he murmured.
Big day tomorrow.
I stayed still, breathing through my nose. He pressed a kiss to my temple.
Soon they'll all see you with my mark, standing beside me.
I didn't reply, because all I could see was Anthony's eyes, the night I'd kissed him. The way his hands trembled when they held me, like he couldn't believe I was real. And the way I'd whispered, "Don't leave me." God, how had it come to this? I didn't even hear Roger approach. My mind was somewhere else, anywhere else. His weight shifted the bed, the mattress dipping beneath him as he pulled me toward him. His hands locked around my arm, too firm, too cold.
I need to mark you, sweetheart,
he said, like it was a gift. He slid the back of his hand across my cheek. A chill shot down my spine. Then his mouth crashed against mine, violent, practiced, uninvited. His tongue pushed past my lips, tracing the space like he owned it. When he looked up, his smile curved, sharp and wicked, before he dipped his head into the crook of my neck. And I didn't fight. Not this time. I stared at the ceiling, somewhere above it all, while he pulled my gown from my shoulders. His lips dragged along my throat, my collarbone, lower still. His hands gripped my hips like he was claiming something that was never his to take. Then came the pain, a flash of teeth, A sharp sting at my collarbone. The mark,
You're ready for tomorrow.
he whispered, like it meant something. But all I felt was the absence of Anthony's hands, the warmth of his breath, the sound of my own voice breaking in the dark. The morning broke soft and golden, with the kind of sunlight that filtered through gauzy curtains like spilled honey, too gentle, too quiet for what the day held. I sat on the edge of the bed, numb, watching dust float like falling stars in the sleepy light. My hands were ice cold, clenched tight in my lap. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until the knock came. The door creaked open, and 5 maids in pale silks and velvet slippers shuffled in like ghosts. I didn't know their names. I didn't care to.
Lady Clementine.
One whispered, bowing slightly.
It's time.
I stood because I had to, not because I wanted to. They dressed me in silence, save for the faint rustle of fabric and the soft clinks of jewelry. A deep crimson gown with lace sleeves and a neckline that sat just off my shoulders. It clung to my skin like a second, unwanted layer, heavy, suffocating. The corset was pulled so tight I could barely breathe. But I didn't complain. I deserved the discomfort. Maybe if it hurt enough on the outside, it'd distract from the ache hollowing me out from within. I caught my reflection in the full-length mirror and didn't recognize her. The woman staring back with glassy eyes, her face painted in soft rose and gold, lips the color of blood and secrets. She looked every bit the Luna, regal, composed. But she wasn't me. My heart pounded like a war drum in my chest, loud and steady. I didn't want this, not a single thread of it. But I smiled anyway, because Jack was still back at Ironclaw, because Anthony was still healing, still in danger, and because Roger held all the cards. The fortress courtyard was already buzzing with energy. A crowd had gathered, men in pressed uniforms, women in flowing dresses, children perched on shoulders, pack members I didn't know, didn't trust, and didn't owe a damn thing to. Then I saw him, Roger, standing tall beside Simon, smug as ever in a tailored black suit. His dark hair slicked back, face clean-shaven, lips curled in that grin that once made my heart flutter, now made my skin crawl. He extended a hand toward me as if this were some fairy tale.
You're late, sweetheart,
he murmured when I reached him. His fingers grazed mine, cold and possessive.
but you look stunning. Worth the wait.
He pulled me to his side like a trophy, his grip tightening when I flinched. My stomach turned. He kissed my temple, performative and claiming, and leaned in, whispering low,
Smile, or I'll make you.
So I did, not for him, for Jack, for Anthony, for the lies I had to wear like armor. We walked through the cheering pack, his hand heavy on my waist, thumb rubbing slow circles that made my spine lock up. The Luna mark glinted on my collarbone, still fresh, still foreign. My eyes burned with unshed tears. They cheered louder. I felt smaller. We stepped onto the dais, and the ceremony began. Simon stood off to the side, already half forgotten by his pack. Roger soaked it in like a man starving for power, chest puffed, voice booming, the perfect politician. He recited the oath like he'd been practicing in front of a mirror for years, which he probably had. When it was done, he turned to me, both hands gripping my waist.
I give you your new alpha.
He shouted to the crowd.
And your Luna.
More applause, cheers, howls of approval, and I stood there, trembling in his hold, every muscle tight as wire. Later that afternoon, I sat alone in my new room, Roger's room, now mine too, apparently. The scent of him clung to everything, his cologne, his arrogance, his damn ego soaked into the sheets. There were knockdowns in my chest I hadn't named yet, regret, guilt, longing. I wanted to rip this dress off, scrub my skin raw, scream until my voice gave out. Instead, I laid down on the cold side of the bed, facing the wall, clutching the pillow like it was the only thing holding me together. I thought of Anthony, of his smile, crooked and rare, but real. The way his hand would linger at the small of my back, like he couldn't bear not touching me. The sound of his laugh in the woods. How he'd whispered, "Don't leave me," with blood on his lips and fear in his eyes. God, I missed him. I wondered if he'd eaten, if his stitches still hurt, if he could feel the bond between us pulling tight, desperate. My phone buzzed once. Jessica. I didn't answer, because if I heard his name out loud, I'd break. And I couldn't afford to shatter, not yet. Not until I got Jack out. Not until I had a plan. Not until I could look Anthony in the eye and say I chose him, freely and fully, without chains or consequences. That night, as fireworks exploded above the fortress in honor of Roger's rise, I curled into a tight ball beneath the covers and cried like a child. Quiet and fierce and hopeless. The sound was swallowed by silk sheets and expensive pillows, but the pain carved deep. This wasn't the end. Not even close. It was just the middle of the worst lie I'd ever had to live. And I prayed he'd wait for me. The fortress was alive with celebration, bright lights, heavy drums, laughter that didn't touch my heart. The air was thick with flowers and lies. Roger's scent clung to my dress like smoke I couldn't wash off, and I couldn't breathe under all that silk and stitched-up pretense. I stood at the window of my room, staring past the rose gardens and torchlit courtyard, watching shadows shift across the trees beyond the gate. My fingers trembled around the curtain hem, knuckles white, stomach twisting like it knew what my heart refused to admit out loud. I wasn't supposed to leave. Not tonight. Not before the ceremony tomorrow. But Anthony, God Anthony, his name throbbed in my chest like an ache that wouldn't dull. I waited until the noise outside got louder, until Roger was too busy accepting praise and pouring wine, until the maids left me alone with the lie I was supposed to wear tomorrow. Then I slipped through the back, barefoot under the moonlight, my cloak clutched tight around my shoulders. I didn't think. If I thought, I'd freeze. If I froze, I'd never get to him. My legs just moved, down the gravel drive, past the guards who didn't look twice, heart pounding like a drum line in my ribs. The hospital was quiet, too quiet. White walls, sterile light. The faint scent of antiseptic clinging to the air like guilt. I didn't belong here either, but I belonged with him. His room was at the end of the hallway. I knew that walk like muscle memory. I dreamed it every night since I left. And I heard him before I saw him.
I need to see her, Will.
Anthony's voice was rough, tired, thinned out like an old rope ready to snap.
She'll come back,
Will said, but his voice lacked conviction. Anthony scoffed.
That's what you said yesterday. What if something happened? What if she's in trouble and I'm stuck in this goddamn bed?
I stepped in before Will could answer. The moment Anthony saw me, everything stopped. His eyes locked on mine, and I swear his whole body softened. Shoulders sagged, jaw unclenched, breath caught halfway out. It was like watching a storm calm down in real time. He looked wrecked, pale, tired, still hooked to tubes and wires. But his eyes, those stormy blue eyes that always saw right through me, they lit up like sunrise. And something in my chest just broke.
Clementine.
My name fell out of his mouth like a prayer. I didn't say a word. I crossed the room in 3 long strides, dropped my cloak, and kissed him. Just kissed him. He kissed me like he was drowning, like he'd been starving, like my lips were home. His hand found my waist like it always had, fingers splayed and trembling, like he needed to make sure I was real. I slid my palms up the side of his jaw, feeling the stubble there, soft and rough all at once. His mouth tasted like regret and salt and relief. His kiss was slow at first, almost hesitant, but then deeper, more urgent, like he'd been holding his breath and finally exhaled.
You came,
he whispered against my lips, forehead resting against mine. I promised, didn't I? My voice cracked, small and broken. He looked at me for a long moment, his thumb brushing my cheek like it was the only thing keeping him grounded.
You came too late.
I know, I'm sorry. I sat beside him, curling my knees up beside his hip. He shifted slightly, wincing as he made space for me. One hand stroking the side of his arm, slow and soft. He kept his eyes on mine like I might disappear if he blinked.
I thought something happened.
He said.
You were gone for days.
I looked down at our hands. His thumb was brushing over my knuckles, slow, tender. I just couldn't come back right away, I said quietly. He nodded like he believed me, like that was enough, but his eyes searched mine.
Did something happen back at Ironclaw?
I hesitated. The truth sat heavy on the back of my tongue, about Roger, about Jack, about the way I'd had to let Roger touch my back during the parade while I pretended not to flinch, about how every breath I took back there felt stolen. But I couldn't tell him, not like this, not when he was healing, not when I knew he'd tear out every IV and come charging through the fortress gates if he knew the whole truth. I smiled instead. Software, faint, a lie wrapped in silk, number just family stuff. You know how it is. He exhaled, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear.
You're here now. That's all I care about.
I nodded, but the weight in my chest grew heavier. He let his head fall back onto the pillow, his fingers tightening around mine as he shifted with a quiet wince.
Just lay with me, please.
So I did. I curled up beside him, careful of his injuries, my head resting against his chest. The steady beat of his heart beneath my cheek soothed something wild in me, like a lullaby only I could hear. I traced the edge of his bandage with feather-light fingertips, memorizing the warmth of his skin beneath mine.
You mean everything to me, Clem. You know that, right?
Tears burned behind my eyes. I closed them and let the ache settle deep. I kissed his hand, my lips trembling against his skin. I know, I whispered. The clock ticked past midnight. Outside, the world kept spinning. But in that hospital room, time held its breath. Eventually, his breathing evened out. I watched his chest rise and fall, his face softened by sleep. Even now, he looked like he was in pain, but peaceful too, like he knew I'd been there. I kissed his forehead, brushed the hair off his brow, and whispered, "I love you." Then I stood, heart screaming, and slipped back into the darkness, back into a life that didn't belong to me, back into the arms of a man I'd never love. The sky was cruel that day, a washed-out blue, too perfect for the storm brewing in my chest. Not a single cloud to hide under, not even the mercy of wind. Just heat, stillness, and the heavy press of something I couldn't shake off, no matter how tightly I wrapped my arms around myself. The fortress grounds were dressed in golds and whites. Ribbons flapped from the stone balconies, trailing like ghosts in the breeze. I stood still as the maids buttoned the back of my gown, the fabric clinging to me like a second skin. Lace sleeves, pearl detailing. A train long enough to sweep the whole damn pack's expectations under it.
You look like a dream, my lady,
one whispered behind me. I didn't answer, couldn't. My tongue felt too heavy in my mouth. I smiled politely at her. The mirror reflected a version of me I didn't recognize. My lips were painted soft rose, my hair pinned into a twist that revealed the column of my neck. The same neck Roger would mark tonight. My eyes, though, they betrayed me, red-rimmed, hollow. I blinked, once, slow, then again. But no amount of blinking could clear the ache burning behind them. I was marrying a man I didn't love, a man who had warned everything I held dear just to get his way. And Anthony, God, Anthony didn't even know. He thought I was safe. He thought I had a choice. The courtyard was loud with celebration. Moonvail wolves stood shoulder to shoulder with Ironclaw, laughing, clapping, raising glasses like this was some fated union sent down by the moon goddess herself. My hands were trembling beneath the bouquet. Roger took them in his and squeezed too firm, his thumb grazing the mark he'd forced on me days before.
You're mine now, Clementine.
he whispered at the altar, loud enough for only me.
And tonight you'll finally understand what that means.
I smiled. The kind of smile that cracked your soul wide open. The moment the oath was sealed and the cheers erupted, I felt something inside me go quiet, like a bird curling its wings in surrender. I nodded and kissed him when they asked us to. Just a brush of lips, polite and practiced, while every cell in my body screamed for Anthony. I didn't speak much during the reception, just smiled and thanked people and nodded like a well-trained doll. My eyes kept flicking to the gate, the horizon, the road beyond. Half of me still hoped, still wished, that somehow Anthony would show up and drag me out of here, all bloodied and stubborn, with that wild look in his eyes that made me believe in better endings. But he didn't. How could he? By nightfall, the fortress had grown quiet, the guests trickling out like rainwater down stone steps. Roger's hand never left my lower back, like he was afraid I might vanish if he let go.
Ready, sweetheart?
He said as he pushed the door to the Luna chambers open. I hesitated, just for a second. Then I nodded, letting my feet carry me inside. The room was warm, lit with soft candles and firelight. The bed looked untouched, too clean for what it would witness. Roger poured us both a glass of wine, handed one to me. I sipped, just enough to keep my lips busy. He watched me with a gaze that made my skin crawl.
We made a beautiful couple today,
He said, stepping closer. I didn't answer. He set his glass down, reached for me. His fingers traced my jaw, my collarbone, down to the edge of my sleeve.
Everything's perfect now,
He murmured. But it wasn't, not for me. My heart belonged to a man lying in a hospital bed miles away, probably wondering why I hadn't come back. Roger leaned in, pressed his mouth to mine. I flinched, only slightly, but he felt it.
What's wrong?
He asked, voice low. I shook my head. Nothing. He smiled at me. His grip tightened on my waist, pulling me back against him. His touch was possessive, firm, his breath hot against my neck. He pressed a kiss there, and I didn't flinch this time. He spun me gently, brushing a thumb on the back of my skin, his breath hot against my neck. He pressed open-mouthed kisses there.
You know you were always meant to be mine.
I nodded. One shallow nod. Not because I believed it, but because saying no meant risking everything. He spun me again. I didn't fight when he kissed me. I couldn't. He deepened it quickly, hands sliding down the fabric of my gown.
I've waited so long for this,
He murmured, tearing at the buttons, the sound of each one popping off echoing louder than my heartbeat.
I want to see you. All of you.
The fabric slipped from my shoulders, and I stood still as his fingers traced down my arms, then lower, his lips leaving a trail over my collarbone, down to my chest. But all I could see, all I could feel, was Anthony. The way his hands trembled when he touched me, like I was something sacred. The way he whispered my name like he didn't want to wake up from whatever spell we were under. It hit me all at once, that night, that kiss, the quiet way he held me, like he'd been waiting his whole damn life just to be gentle with me. A soft gasp slipped from my lips before I could stop it. Roger stilled. He looked up at me with a crooked smile, misreading everything.
You want this too, don't you?
He asked, his voice low and smug, as if my heartbreak had anything to do with him. But I wasn't gasping for Roger. I was drowning in the memory of Anthony, the only man who ever touched me like I mattered. Roger didn't wait for a response. He stepped back and unbuttoned his own shirt, guiding my hands to help. My fingers moved stiffly. I barely felt the fabric, barely heard the groan he gave when I touched his skin. He guided me forward, voice low.
Kiss me here,
He said, pointing to his chest. I obeyed.
Lower.
I kissed him again, skin warm under my lips, my heart screaming louder with every breath I took.
Good girl,
He whispered, pulling me to the bed. The silk sheets were cool beneath my knees as he positioned me in front of him on my palms. His hands gripped my hips, rough and steady, guiding me how he wanted me. Every touch branded me in silence. He groaned against my neck as he pressed against me from behind, breathing hard.
Tell me.
He growled.
Tell me who you belong to.
I swallowed. You.
Louder.
I belong to you, I said. But the words felt like glass in my throat. His rhythm grew more desperate, more frantic, like he was trying to stake a claim deeper than skin, like he needed to prove something. The whole time, I kept my eyes locked on the wall in front of me, a single candle flickering on the dresser. The only light in the room, the only thing that felt real. And when it was over, when his weight finally lifted and he sighed, sated and unaware, I curled in on myself under the blanket. He drifted off beside me, just like that, peaceful. But I stayed wide awake, staring at the ceiling. I never cried. Not that night, not out loud. But something inside me was gone, and I didn't know how to get it back. And as the moonlight spilled across the stone walls, and Roger's breathing grew deep, and even beside me, I whispered into the darkness, I still belong to you, Anthony. The days blurred, not like rain or wind, not even like sleep, more like smoke, thick and hard to breathe, clinging to everything. My lungs carried it, my skin wore it, and even when I smiled for the pack, I could still taste the ash. Roger hadn't changed, not even a little. He was still the same smug I'd met months ago. He drank, loud, messy, entitled drinking. He flirted with anything that batted eyelashes his way. The maids tried not to look, but their pity was heavy, sitting in the air like damp wool. And Sarah, she wasn't a ghost from his past. She was flesh, voice, lipstick on his collar, perfume that lingered in the hallway. But I didn't ask, because I didn't care, not anymore. Whatever explanation he had, whatever excuse he'd spin, I was done holding my breath for it. The part of me that used to wonder, used to hope, it wasn't there anymore. That night was cold, unusually so for late spring. The fortress had that eerie silence where everything feels too still. Even the moon looked tired, barely hanging in the dark sky. I should have been asleep, but I couldn't. Not when I could feel the shift in the air, the kind you feel deep in your chest, like your heart already knows something's wrong before your brain catches up. Then I heard them, whispers, laughter, the sound of a heel brushing against marble, too soft to be casual. I slipped out of bed barefoot, my nightgown brushing the tops of my knees. The halls were dark, shadows flickering from the wall sconces. My heart thudded, slow at first, then climbing. Every step I took closer to Roger's wing made the knot in my stomach pull tighter. His door wasn't even shut all the way, and through the narrow gap, I saw them. Sarah was on top of him, straddling him like he was hers, and maybe, in a twisted way, he always had been. Her dress was hiked up. His shirt was torn open, chest bare. Her hand slid across his chest like she'd done it 100 times. She was kissing him desperately. Roger's head was thrown back, eyes closed, mouth parted with a breathy sound whispering her name like he'd never married me. I didn't say a word. I just turned away, barefoot on the cold stone floor, my feet stinging with each step. But I didn't cry. Not this time. What was the point? I knew exactly what he was. And the worst part? I'd tried so damn hard to change him, not because I believed he could change, but because Anthony even dads Simon. They all thought maybe I could. Maybe I was the missing piece, but I wasn't. Morning sunlight poured in through the tall windows like nothing had happened, like the world kept spinning, even when mine had stopped. I sat at the long table in the grand hall, my coffee untouched, hands folded in my lap. Roger walked in late, his hair still damp from a shower. Not even a hint of guilt. He kissed the top of my head like it was a habit, like I was furniture. "Why did you marry me?" I asked. My voice low but clear. No waver, no drama, just truth waiting in the air. He blinked, then laughed. Actually laughed.
Because
he said, plucking a grape from the bowl.
it's a disgrace to an alpha when his Luna runs off with a beta.
I glared at him, heart thudding louder now. He didn't flinch.
You were mine, Clementine. Always were. Always will be.
His voice turned smug. I wasn't about to let the whole damn region whisper that Roger Blackthorn got left for a rogue wolf. I stared at my ring, gold, heavy, cold. I didn't run with Anthony, I said quietly, my voice steady. I ran from you, remember? The night you humiliated me, told me I belonged on your knees? He popped a grape into his mouth and chewed like it was some kind of joke.
Sweetheart,
He said, smirking.
you ended up running straight to Anthony.
He said, with that smug little tilt to his head.
No one's going to believe you were running from me that night.
He leaned in, voice low and full of something sharp.
I wanted you. I needed to get my pride back. You were the price.
His words hit harder than fists. I walked away, my gown swept behind me like a ghost, but my spine stayed straight, and my silence said everything he didn't deserve to hear. Back in my room, I curled into the corner by the window, where the light hit just right. The wind was soft, brushing the sheer curtains like fingers, and I thought of Anthony. His laugh when he was half asleep, the warmth of his palm resting on the small of my back like I was something sacred. The way he'd say my name, not loud, not urgent, just soft like a prayer whispered into the hollow of the night. I remembered the last time I saw him, how his chest rose and fell with sleep, and how I tucked the blanket around him like it would somehow keep the world from hurting him. He didn't know. He didn't know what I was giving up to keep him safe. He didn't know the price I paid every second I wasn't in his arms. But I knew. And that night, when I crawled into bed alone again, I didn't cry. I just whispered to the dark, "Hold on a little longer, Anthony. I'm still yours, even if the world says otherwise." And I swore one day I'd stop being the sacrifice. I'd be the fire. I'd stopped counting the days. They all bled together anyway. Soft gray mornings, brittle afternoons, and nights that felt like drowning in quiet. The fortress was colder now, not from winter, but from the way loneliness crept under doors and into my bones. Even the walls had started to feel like they were listening, like they knew I was lying to everyone, including myself. Every night I'd whisper to the moon goddess, like some desperate child begging for answers. If Anthony was my mate, why wasn't he here? And if Roger was, then why did every inch of me recoil when he touched me? There was never an answer, just wind brushing the curtains and that awful ache deep in my chest where his voice used to live. I curled tighter under the covers, clutching the edge of my pillow like it could stop my thoughts from spiraling. I'd almost fallen asleep when I heard it. The door creaked open like it was holding its breath. I shot up, heart thudding, clutching the covers to my chest. And there he was, Anthony. His eyes were stormy, wild almost. His chest rose and fell like he'd run the whole way here, and maybe he had. His hair was a mess, wet from the rain, his shirt clinging to him in places. But it wasn't the look of him that broke me. It was the way he looked at me, like I was something he'd lost and didn't think he'd ever find again. "Anthony?" My voice barely above a whisper. He didn't speak. He just stepped forward, reached for me, and kissed me. Not soft, not gentle. It was pain, regret, desperation. Like he'd been holding it in and it finally broke loose. His hands trembled where they held my face, thumbs brushing the corners of my mouth. My lips parted for him and I forgot everything. Roger, the lies, the wedding band on my finger that felt like a shackle. Then he pulled back, his breath hot against my cheek.
You have no idea,
He said, voice thick.
how much I waited. I waited for you, Clem. I waited and waited at the hospital, thinking any second you'd walk through that door.
I opened my mouth, but nothing came out.
I ran.
He said, like the words were a confession.
I ran from the hospital the second I could stand. Went to Ironclaw. Nothing. Just whispers and dust. Then one of your pack members told me you were in Moonvail.
He let out a bitter laugh and shook his head.
And then I saw the photos, the Luna ceremony, and your smile.
He swallowed hard.
You didn't love me?
He asked. Just like that. No build-up, no warning. No, my voice barely cracked.
You're lying.
I'm not.
Clementine.
It meant nothing. I blinked hard. Everything between us. It was a mistake. Anthony stepped back like I'd slapped him. His eyes flared, mouth opening, then closing again. He didn't believe me.
Those nights, that kiss in the cabin, me holding your bloodied hands while you whispered, "Don't leave me," that meant nothing to you?
I couldn't look at him. It was nothing. Please leave. He didn't move.
How can you forget everything in 2 days?
His voice was hoarse, like every word was scraping its way out. I still said nothing. He grabbed my waist, gently but with that barely contained storm in his fingers, and pushed me back onto the bed. My breath caught. His body hovered over mine, his hands pinning my arms gently beside my head, caging me in like he needed to block out the world just to reach me again. His eyes searched mine, furious and pleading and full of grief.
Tell me this means nothing,
He said, voice rough.
Tell me this doesn't feel like home.
And then his lips crashed into mine again, hard, angry, desperate. And gods, I gave in. I kissed him back like the world wasn't ending, like I hadn't betrayed everything we were. I let the truth live in that kiss, the ache, the pull, the madness of being so in love it hurt. My fingers found the hem of his shirt. His mouth moved to my jaw, then down to my collarbone, where he kissed me like he was memorizing every inch before losing it forever.
You know I can't live without you.
He whispered, voice breaking as his hand slid along the fabric of my gown. That's when reality came back like a slap. No, I said, pushing him back. Anthony, stop. He froze, his eyes widened, red-rimmed and wet, lips parted like he was still halfway in the dream of us, hurt spreading across his face like a bruise. Then he stood, slowly, like every bone in his body was breaking one by one. The silence was so thick it hurt. Roger's voice, sharp, cold, cutting through the room like a knife.
What's going on in here?
I scrambled off the bed, straightening my gown with trembling hands. Anthony didn't flinch. He turned slowly, jaw clenched. Roger leaned against the door frame, arms crossed, eyes gleaming.
You know, you can be executed for laying hands on a Luna.
Anthony didn't even blink.
And you can rot for taking away my mate.
His voice was low, steady, but the air thickened with rage. Their wolves were close, too close. I felt it rising off them like heat from the earth before a storm. Anthony's shoulders tightened. Roger's fingers twitched at his sides.
Tell me, Clementine,
Roger said, smirking.
which of us do you belong to?
My mouth opened, but nothing came out. That's when Simon stepped in.
What's going on here?
He asked, eyes darting from Anthony to Roger.
Anthony, my son, where have you been?
Anthony's jaw tightened.
I met with an accident.
Why didn't you contact me?
Simon stepped forward and pulled him into a hug.
I wasn't conscious, Dad.
Simon smiled faintly.
I'm just glad you're safe.
He turned to Roger.
Is everything all right here?
Roger glanced at me, then back at Anthony. I knew that look, calculating, smug. He was weighing it, debating whether to spill everything and wreck Anthony's standing with Simon in one clean blow. Please don't, I begged silently. To my surprise, Roger just smiled.
Everything's fine, Dad. Just a misunderstanding.
Simon nodded, his tone firm but fatherly.
Good. Anthony, your duties resume tomorrow, and I want you at the fortress more often. We need your presence.
Anthony just nodded once, jaw tight.
Understood, Dad.
But he didn't look at Simon. He was still staring at me. Then he turned and walked out, silent, wounded. I wanted to run after him, I wanted to scream that I loved him, but I didn't, because I'd already burned that bridge with my own damn hands. Roger had barely come home in a week, unless you count stumbling in after midnight, reeking of whiskey and expensive perfume that wasn't mine. I stopped flinching when he kissed my cheek at public dinners. I stopped asking where he was going. We were just wearing each other like costumes now, Alpha and Luna, a show for the world. The stone walls of the Moonvail fortress had become a familiar kind of prison for me. Funny, ain't it? Being Luna, you'd think I'd be queen of the damn castle. But lately, every echoing corridor felt like another step away from the man who'd carved himself into my soul. Anthony. He was around more, just like Simon, our ex-alpha, had said.
Pack business.
Now he walked these halls like a ghost in uniform, stoic, polite, and maddeningly distant. He never said a word, never once asked if I was okay. I hated how clean Anthony looked now. Neat beard trimmed, black shirt pressed, and boots polished like he was trying to become untouchable. Not because he wanted to be, but because I'd pushed him there. Anthony played the part to a T. All respectful nods, and Luna this and Luna that. It was like a damn dagger twisting slow. But a beta wolf can't hide everything, not from me. I saw it, in the way his eyes lingered just a second too long, like he couldn't help it. The way his shoulders would tense up every time Roger brushed past me, like he was holding back a growl. I caught the flicker of worry in Anthony's eyes whenever I stood up from the Alpha's table, trying to hold that fake smile in place, even though it cracked at the edges. And when Roger kissed me in front of everyone, I stopped flinching. There wasn't any point anymore, but Anthony's jaw would clench like he was biting down on something sharp, something he couldn't say. And he knew I slept alone in my chambers. The silence in that vast room was a heavy blanket, suffocating me with the absence of his warmth. Then came the anniversary, Simon and Lady Eleanor's silver jubilee, a grand affair, the kind where you had to plaster on a smile that didn't reach your eyes and pretend everything was peaches and cream. Anthony had been helping Simon with the guest list these past few days. I was rushing, the silk of my gown still pooling around my waist, the clasp refusing to cooperate, when the door creaked open.
I thought you were dressed. I'm sorry, Luna.
Anthony, his voice low and rough, sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the cool air. He'd turned away instantly, his back to me, a rigid line of respect. But I'd caught a glimpse. The bare expanse of my shoulder, the way his breath hitched almost imperceptibly. It was a damn echo. A few months back, when Roger had first slithered his way into our pack, all charm and false promises, I'd been caught like this, half-dressed, vulnerable. Anthony had been there. He stood frozen in the doorway. His eyes met mine for a second before flicking away. His jaw tightened, as if seeing me was some kind of crime. Something I hadn't understood then, something that burned a whole lot clearer now. The memory hit me like a rogue wave. The air in the room suddenly felt thick, the music from the great hall a distant, distorted hum. My head swam, the ornate tapestry on the wall blurring. "Anthony," I whispered, catching myself. And the next thing I knew, his strong arms wrapped around me, catching me before I hit the cold stone floor. Everything went black. The last sensation, the solid, familiar feel of Anthony's embrace. I blinked slowly, my body heavy, like I'd been swimming in sleep instead of lying on a bed tucked in layers of silk and worry. The first thing I saw was Anthony's face. It was hovering above mine, his brow creased tight, like the world had caved in and left him holding up the sky. His eyes searched mine the second they fluttered open, stormy gray and straining to stay calm.
You scared the hell out of me.
He whispered, his voice raw at the edges.
You fainted.
I blinked slowly, the ceiling above me blurred in soft gold light, swaying like candle flame. The sound of laughter still poured in through the balcony doors, mingling with the soft hum of string instruments and the faint clinking of glassware. The celebration outside went on, grand and glowing and oblivious. A cool cloth brushed against my forehead, and that's when I saw her, the healer. Middle-aged, freckled, hair pinned in a lazy twist. She looked kind but hesitant, like she wasn't sure if the news she carried would lift me or destroy me. I swallowed thickly, tried to sit up. She placed a hand on my shoulder.
Take it slow, Clementine. You fainted because of stress. You haven't been eating, but there's something else.
My pulse spiked. The healer looked between us before speaking, as if weighing the shape of her words.
You're pregnant.
For a full second, the air was stolen from the room. I stared at her, not blinking, not breathing. I turned to Anthony, and he looked right back, breath caught, jaw clenched. His eyes wide, warm, and shining in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. Hope and fear warred across his face like colliding tides.
It's mine,
He said, not asking, knowing.
It's my child, isn't it?
He brushed a strand of my hair.
It's mine. I know it's mine.
I didn't speak. I just nodded. And in the next heartbeat, I was in his arms. He wrapped around me so carefully, so fiercely, like I was made of glass and wildfire all at once. I buried my face in his chest, inhaled the scent of cedar and warmth and home, and let my body fall against his like it belonged there. His lips found my forehead, brushing softly, reverently, like a vow whispered into skin.
I've wanted to hold you like this every night since you left.
He murmured.
You don't have to run anymore. You don't have to fight alone. This baby, we're not hiding this.
But I wasn't ready to dream yet. Not fully. Not when Jack was not safe. Because standing in the doorway, her sharp heels clicking against marble, was the one woman who'd been waiting for me to slip. Lady Eleanor. She stood there like she'd been born into suspicion. Arms folded, mouth curled into a delicate sneer.
Well, well,
She said, slow and smug, clapping her hands once with a flourish.
how precious. Our little Luna, spread open for a servant.
Don't, he is not a servant, I whispered, gripping his shirt.
I warned Simon about you.
She snapped.
A poor little Omega pretending to wear a crown. You're nothing but dirt dressed up in emeralds.
Her eyes flicked to Anthony with disgust.
And now you've dirtied our legacy.
Anthony stepped in front of me, jaw locked, fists clenched at his sides.
Say what you want about me.
He said calmly, but there was steel in his tone.
But you don't talk to her like that.
She scoffed.
Don't worry, it won't stay a secret for long. Everyone's gonna know.
Her gaze shifted to Anthony then, sharp and cold as a blade.
That the little boy Simon raised like his own. The same one he trusted, the one he gave everything to, turned around and stabbed him right in the damn back.
Anthony stepped in front of me, chest heaving.
I didn't stab Dad. I've stayed loyal to him every damn day of my life.
But she wasn't finished. She was just warming up.
He loved you. Hell, sometimes I think he loved you more than Roger. And this betrayal? You've spit in his face.
I kept my loyalty, Lady Eleanor.
Anthony's voice cracked like thunder.
You don't know the whole truth.
Oh, but I know enough.
She said coldly.
And so will everyone else by morning.
With that, she turned on her heel and swept out, heels clicking like gunshots on the stone floor. I didn't even think. I just ran after her. Lady Eleanor, please, just wait. My voice caught. It's not what you think. But she didn't stop. She didn't look back. And even if she had, I knew. She'd never liked me. Not from the moment I stepped foot in this place. Not even before Roger. I turned back to Anthony, trembling. You need to leave, now, before this gets worse. But he just shook his head, slow and solid, like a mountain unmoved by storms.
No.
Anthony.
No.
He said louder this time, stepping close.
For years, I gave up everything for this pack. My freedom, my name, my wants. I watched you walk down the aisle to a man who doesn't love you, and I said nothing. I swallowed it all.
His hand found mine, fingers curling over mine.
You can throw 100 walls between us, Clementine, but I'm not walking away this time. Not from you, not from our kid.
He touched my stomach gently, reverently.
No one's taking them. No one's hurting their mother. Not while I'm breathing.
Tears slid down my cheeks. You don't know, I whispered. His brows drew together, his lips parted.
What don't I know, Clem? What the hell have you been hiding from me?
His voice was rough, strained, desperate. His hands shot out, gripping my arms tight. Not to hurt, just to hold me still, like he could keep the truth from slipping through my silence. I shut my eyes, but the tears broke through anyway. Hot, heavy, like the truth had finally found a way out of me, even if I couldn't speak it. You don't understand, I whispered, voice shaking. My chest felt too tight to breathe. Then he shook me, just enough to jolt me, to snap me out of whatever wall I was hiding behind.
Don't give me that.
He snapped, eyes blazing.
Try me. What don't I understand? That you ran back to him? That you left me with nothing? Not even a goodbye?
His voice cracked near the end, and it shattered something inside me.
Tell me, Clementine.
He said, softer now, more broken than angry.
Tell me why you keep choosing him when your heart's still with me.
If I don't obey Roger, my voice cracked. He said he'll take Jack, my brother, Anthony. He'll use him as leverage. That's why I had to marry him. That's why I've been pretending. Anthony's hands trembled as he cupped my face.
Why didn't you tell me?
Because my voice barely made it out. Because Roger told me not to, said he'd hurt Jack, said he'd proof your disloyalty to Simon if I said a word. Anthony pulled back like he'd been slapped. Then his jaw hardened.
No more,
he said, low and rough.
No more hiding. No more letting him control you.
He grabbed my wrist, not rough but firm.
You're coming with me.
Where are you taking me? I gasped, trying to pull back. He turned to me with fire in his eyes.
To Simon.
Why?
Because the truth's coming out, Clementine. I don't care who hears it. I don't care what it costs me. He's going to know what his son did and what kind of man I refuse to be.
I tried to resist, but I didn't really want to. Because deep down, I was tired too. Tired of pretending. Tired of living like my love was a sin. So I let him lead me through the fortress. My heart beat louder than the music downstairs, louder than the pounding of my feet. The hallway lights flickered against stone walls. Somewhere below, laughter echoed. Glass clinked. A celebration still roared while the world I knew tilted on its axis. And Anthony, steady, furious, burning with love, was taking me straight into the storm with him. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't scared. I was ready. The celebration hall was glowing, dressed in gold and silver, with candles flickering like fireflies caught in a moment of stillness. There were murmurs of music, the low hum of conversation, but all of it felt muffled to me as if the air itself had thinned. My fingers were tangled with Anthony's, our hands clasped tight like we were each other's only anchor in the storm. I felt it before I saw it. The shift in the room, the sharp inhale from Lady Eleanor's lips as she leaned into Simon's ear. Her expression unreadable, yet sharp as a blade. And Simon, his back straightened like someone had struck a nerve. His eyes locked on me, then dropped. Straight to my belly, my pulse hiccuped. I held tighter to Anthony, then he moved. Long strides, his boots hitting the floor like war drums. I swear the chatter stopped before he even reached us. The entire room fell into a still silence, breath held hostage. And then, crack. The sound of Simon's hand slapping Anthony across the face cut through the air like thunder. Anthony's head snapped to the side, the imprint of Simon's hand already reddening across his cheek. My breath caught in my throat. The crowd gasped. Chairs scraped. Goblets rattled.
You!
Simon's voice shook with betrayal.
I never thought you'd betray me.
Anthony didn't speak. He turned his face slowly, the red mark already blooming across his cheek. His jaw was tight, that familiar defiant tilt to his chin I'd always known would someday save me.
I loved you, raised you like my own, gave you everything.
He shouted, chest heaving.
And this?
Simon's hand trembled as he pointed at me.
This is how you repay me?
I stepped forward, my voice ready, but Anthony raised his hand gently, silencing me with just a touch.
I didn't betray you, Dad.
He said quietly, then louder.
Don't you dare call me that.
Simon cut in, his voice shaking.
You're no son of mine. You've embarrassed this entire bloodline. Get out, now.
Anthony's jaw clenched, and for a second, I could feel the heat roll off him. But he didn't back down. His voice was even, low, but each word felt like it was carved from stone.
I'll leave,
I said.
I'll do what you want. But before I go, you need to hear the truth. All of it. The stuff no one told you. The things I've been carrying for years.
The fire in Simon's eyes flickered, dimmed just enough.
Talk. Say what you have to say and be gone.
I could feel Anthony's heartbeat, wild and uneven, as he took his step forward. He looked like a man preparing for battle, not against his father, but against the weight of his own guilt.
Roger's always been like this. You knew it. We both knew it deep down. The drinking, the women. But you believed if he married Clementine, it might ground him. I thought so too.
Simon looked away, jaw tight.
I pushed her toward him.
Anthony said, voice heavy.
Because I trusted you. Because you believed it'd help. But it didn't. You wanted her in the family, so I stepped back, even when I saw how unhappy she was. Even when I saw how he treated her. I stayed loyal.
I could see it, his pain, the guilt, the self-loathing. It was stitched into every breath he took, every crease on his forehead. Simon's brow furrowed, his fists trembled. He looked at me and then back to Anthony.
That night,
He said,
when Roger danced with his ex while Clementine stood alone, drunk and humiliated, I knew she didn't feel safe. I watched her fade bit by bit, and I stayed quiet because I didn't want to break your trust.
He looked at me then. And God. The ache in his eyes made my chest pull tight.
I loved her quietly, from afar. Never confessed it, never crossed that line. Not then. I kept my distance, because I didn't want to betray you. I didn't want to hurt you.
His voice cracked. Just a little, barely there, but I heard it.
But everything changed,
He whispered.
that night when Roger dragged her into that room.
A hush fell over the room again. Simon's lips parted, but no words came.
She said no.
Anthony said.
And he didn't listen. Tried to force himself upon her, she slapped him. He insulted her bloodline. Called her names no man should ever use. And when she slapped him and ran, he sent wolves after her, dead or alive, for his pride.
I felt my breath catch. My hand moved on instinct to my stomach. My child, our child. Simon staggered like the words punched him in the gut.
I got to her just in time.
Anthony said, his voice nearly a growl.
I protected her. I took her to my house. I didn't tell you because she was scared, because she knew what would happen. And then Roger sent his men again. We barely escaped.
He paused, and I saw the tremor in his fingers.
So I built a hut, far from the pack, in the woods of Appalachian mountains where no one would find her. I kept her safe. And in those quiet nights when she couldn't sleep, when she cried without sound, I stayed beside her.
His eyes locked with mine. I swear my heart cracked clean in two.
That's when it happened.
He said.
We made love. Not out of lust, but because I loved her. I love her, and I couldn't keep pretending I didn't. She deserved to be loved the right way.
Roger let out a sharp breath, stepping forward now, jaw clenched. Simon didn't even look at him. Anthony continued, voice trembling now.
But they found us again. We ran. And then I got shot.
Anthony said, softer now.
She stayed with me, took care of me. But Roger wouldn't quit. He warned her family, her little brother. Told her he'd take Jack if she didn't come back. So she did. To protect them. Not because she wanted to.
Anthony stepped closer, right up to Simon, no fear in his eyes, just truth.
I never betrayed you, Dad. I loved you. I was never disloyal to you. I never planned to hurt you, but I won't apologize for loving her. And I won't let you keep believing lies.
Silence. Simon's face was stone, but something behind his eyes broke. His shoulders slumped. His breathing slowed. I felt hot tears sting my eyes, but I didn't look away. And then Simon turned to Roger. Roger was breathing hard. His fists clenched. His eyes darted between us, trapped.
Is it true?
Simon asked, voice eerily calm.
What he said, is it true?
Roger didn't speak. Simon took a step toward him.
Answer me.
Roger's lip curled.
She's an Omega.
He spat.
She should have been honored, I even.
Smack. The sound of Simon's hand against Roger's cheek cracked louder than the last.
You're no son of mine,
He said.
You're filth.
Roger's smug grin fell away like ash on the wind. Simon's voice rose.
You may be born of my blood, but you never carried my loyalty, my discipline, my heart. You were handed everything and still became poison. And Anthony...
He turned to Anthony slowly, measured, like a man about to give away a secret he's held too long.
You weren't born from my blood, but you were born from my heart.
Simon said, voice dipping low with pride and something even deeper. Something inside me cracked. I turned toward Anthony, just a little, watching the way his throat bobbed. His eyes flicked briefly to me, and then back to Simon, like he couldn't dare believe what he'd just heard. Simon's voice didn't shake.
You've carried this pack's weight since you could walk. You've bled for it, protected it, loved it better than my own damn flesh ever could. That makes you my son. That makes you Alpha.
And just like that, the room shattered. Eleanor stepped forward, dress flowing like blood down the marble steps. Her heels clacked in sharp defiance, the sound too loud in a room on the edge of breaking.
Simon, stop,
she hissed.
You're being emotional.
Don't!
He snapped, turning to her with fire in his eyes.
Don't you dare!
Her lips parted like she was about to scream, but Simon cut her off with nothing but a look. His wolf was close to the surface. I could feel it radiating off him in waves, prickling against my skin like static before a storm. And then he turned to me.
I always wanted Clementine to be my daughter-in-law,
he said, softer now, like it cost him something to admit it out loud.
Didn't matter if she married him or you, Anthony. That girl's got a spine of steel and a heart like wildfire. I wanted that for our family.
Tears burned behind my eyes. He walked forward, slow and deliberate, and snatched the silver alpha crown off Roger's head like it never belonged there.
You don't deserve to be Alpha.
Roger's jaw clenched, but he didn't speak. Not a word. Simon turned to Anthony, and without a single dramatic flourish, he placed the crown on his head. It settled there like it was always meant to be. For a second, no one moved. Not a soul. Then the room erupted. Cheers. Howls. Applause that shook the walls and probably the mountains too. People rose from their seats, some crying, others laughing. The elders nodded in silent approval, but all I saw was him. Anthony. The man who had kissed me like I was the last breath he'd ever take. The man who had thrown himself between me and death more times than I could count. The man who looked like a king but held my hand. Like a boy scared of losing the one thing that made him human.